I remember the sound first, the kind of scream that doesn't belong to anything born under daylight. It sliced through the night like metal on bone, echoing through the forest until it reached me in the tower. I froze halfway through a sip of coffee, staring into the blackness where the trees swayed like a restless sea. They say Yellowstone is never truly silent. Even in the dead of night, the wind whispers through the pines, the creeks hum in the distance, and somewhere out there, something's always moving. But that night, after the scream faded, the forest went absolutely still. It was like the world had stopped breathing. I'd been alone up there for 17 nights, long enough for solitude to start feeling like company. The routine was supposed to keep me sane. Radio checks at midnight, temperature readings every 2 hours, and the quiet comfort of knowing that if anything went wrong, someone like Lena back at base would be listening. But tonight felt different. There was something off about the silence. It had a weight to it, as if the entire forest was holding its breath, waiting for me to notice something I wasn't supposed to. I set down the mug and reached for the binoculars, scanning the tree line. The moon hung low, half buried behind a sheet of drifting clouds, painting everything in dull silver. Lodgepole pines stretched in every direction, their needles whispering in the faint breeze. Nothing moved. No elk, no owls, not even the distant glow of campers. Just darkness, unbroken and endless. Then I saw it. At first I thought it was a trick of the wind, a branch shifting oddly. But then it straightened. Between two trees, maybe 40 yards from the base of the tower, something stood upright. Too tall for a person, too still for an animal. I could barely make out its outline, a slender shape that seemed to blend with the shadows themselves. I adjusted the focus, heart hammering. The shape tilted its head, watching me. I lowered the binoculars and blinked, expecting the figure to vanish like a bad dream. But when I looked again, it was still there, unmoving, patient. Then it stepped backward and melted into the darkness, gone before I could even exhale. The scream, I realized, hadn't been random. It had been bait. My name is Ethan Cole, and for the last 3 weeks, I've been the night lookout stationed at Tower Ridge, one of the most remote observation posts in Yellowstone National Park. Most nights are uneventful. I log fire risks, watch for illegal campfires, track wildlife migrations. Nothing unusual. But ever since I transferred here from Glacier, I've felt watched. I used to laugh at the stories the older rangers told about voices in the woods that sounded like your own, or lights that appeared in valleys where no roads existed. But tonight I wasn't laughing. The radio crackled softly on the desk beside me. I leaned in, hoping it was Lena checking in early. Instead, I heard static, a faint rhythm that almost sounded like breathing. Then, through the distortion, a whisper. "Ethan!" My hand froze on the dial. It wasn't Lena. The voice was too close, too intimate, like someone standing right behind me, speaking into my ear. I turned around slowly. Nothing. Just the cramped cabin, the desk, the cot, the rain jacket hanging by the window. "Base? This is Tower Ridge," I said, forcing calm into my voice. "Did someone just call me?" Static hissed, followed by Lena's voice, steady and professional. "Negative, Tower Ridge. No transmissions sent your way. You okay up there?" I hesitated. The rational part of me wanted to say yes, that it was just interference. But the part of me that had felt that gaze from the forest, the part that remembered that scream, knew better. "Copy that," I said finally. "All good." I lied. The next hour dragged like cold molasses. I kept the lights low, scanning the woods with my scope. Every so often I thought I saw something shift between the trees, a flicker of movement that disappeared when I looked directly at it. My mind was running circles around itself, turning shadows into shapes and silence into warnings. When I couldn't take the stillness anymore, I stepped outside onto the narrow platform that wrapped around the tower. The metal grated beneath my boots, echoing faintly down the structure's legs. The air was sharp and cold, carrying the scent of pine and distant sulfur from the hot springs miles away. From up here, Yellowstone looked almost holy, a cathedral of stone and forest and steam. But tonight it felt haunted. I swept the spotlight across the clearing below. The beam cut through the dark like a knife, illuminating patches of forest floor. Dust motes and bits of pollen glimmered in the light. Nothing moved. Then, faintly, I saw it again. A flash of movement near the base of the tower, something pale slipping behind a tree trunk. I aimed the beam lower. The tree was empty. The clearing looked untouched. My breath fogged in front of me, trembling in the cold. That's when I heard it, the creak of metal from directly beneath me. Footsteps, slow, deliberate on the tower's lowest platform. Someone or something was climbing. I killed the spotlight immediately and dropped into a crouch, pressing my back to the cabin wall. The only light now came from the moon, faint and broken by clouds. I could hear the metal rungs shifting one by one as weight moved up the ladder. A pause, then another creak. My radio hissed again. "Ethan," the whisper came. "Come down." Every instinct screamed at me to stay still, but curiosity and training fought their own battle in my chest. I eased the pistol from my belt, a standard-issue sidearm used for deterring aggressive wildlife. My hands were trembling. The footsteps stopped halfway up the ladder. Then silence. I waited, barely breathing. My ears tuned to every rustle and groan of the tower. For a long moment, nothing. Then a hand appeared over the edge of the platform, pale, almost colorless, gripping the metal rail. I stepped forward, gun raised. "Park Service, identify yourself." The hand froze, fingers twitching slightly. Then it pulled away, disappearing below the edge. I moved to the opposite window, scanning the ground below. The beam of my flashlight cut across empty space. The clearing was still. No movement, no sound. Whatever had been climbing was gone. My heartbeat slowed, though not by much. I holstered the weapon and leaned against the wall, trying to catch my breath. I dealt with poachers, lost hikers, even bears wandering too close to the tower, but nothing like this. At 2:03 a.m., I logged the incident. Unidentified noise and movement at base of tower. Possible trespasser. Investigation pending daylight. It sounded official enough to hide the unease twisting my gut. Still, something about that whisper lingered in my mind. It hadn't been random, it knew my name. And the voice, it hadn't sounded human. If this story already has your pulse racing, make sure to hit subscribe and turn on the bell. Your support helps me keep bringing these real ranger horror stories to life. Now, let's keep going deeper into the dark side of Yellowstone. I didn't sleep that night. By dawn, I was still at the desk, elbows buried in half-drunk coffee and the tower's old logbooks, trying to make sense of what I'd seen. The sunrise broke over the ridges, painting the world gold and quiet again, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something down there was still watching me. The logbooks were relics, brown, water-stained, some dating back decades. Every lookout was supposed to record their nightly observations: weather, visibility, wildlife, unusual activity. I flipped through a few out of boredom at first, but one particular entry stopped me cold. June 17th, 1989. Heard human voice near the ridge. Male. Kept saying my name even though I never gave it. Reported to base. No record of anyone assigned in sector. The handwriting was shaky, as if whoever wrote it had done so with trembling hands. The name signed at the bottom, Ranger Dale Wesson, was one I recognized from orientation. He'd disappeared that same summer, presumed lost in a backcountry storm. I read the entry again, slower this time. Same pattern. The voice calling a name that shouldn't have been known. The incident logged and dismissed. A familiar shape in the darkness. A chill crept through me that had nothing to do with altitude. I closed the book and turned toward the window. The forest below was alive again with morning sound. Birds, wind, distant rustle of elk moving through the valley. All normal. Too normal. At 9 a.m. I made my regular check-in with base. Lena's voice came through clear this time, soft but professional. Tower Ridge, this is base. You've been quiet tonight. Everything all right up there? Her tone carried a faint note of concern, and for some reason, it hit deeper than I expected. I almost told her everything, the scream, the voice, the pale hand, but something stopped me. Maybe it was pride. Maybe fear that she'd think I'd cracked. "Yeah," I said finally, "quiet night, just paperwork." "Good," she replied. "And hey, try to get some rest." "You sound tired." Her words lingered long after the transmission cut. She was new to dispatch, moved here from Montana a few months back. I hadn't met her in person yet, but we'd talked enough over the radio that her voice had become my tether to the world beyond this tower. By noon, the forest looked harmless again. Sunlight cut through the mist. Steam rose from the distant hot springs, and I almost convinced myself that last night had been an overworked imagination. Almost. When the wind shifted, I caught the faint smell of rot. It was subtle at first, like something decaying far off in the timberline. I leaned out the window, scanning for signs of a dead animal or spoiled meat. Nothing visible. The smell came and went with the breeze, sour and metallic. Curiosity beat caution. I decided to check the ground once the afternoon shift started. The forest looked open enough from above. I could trace the old service trail down to the base and circle the clearing. I told myself it was just field work, a wildlife check, standard protocol, but deep down I knew it was more than that. I needed proof, something physical to explain the hand, the whisper, the movement in the dark. By 2 o'clock I had my gear on, radio, camera, small sidearm, standard ranger pack. The sun was high but filtered through the dense canopy, turning everything below into soft green twilight. The forest floor was damp, padded with fallen needles that muffled my steps. For a while, all I could hear was the rhythmic crunch of my boots and the distant hum of insects. Then I saw them, tracks. At first glance, they looked human. Barefoot, narrow, almost delicate, but the spacing was off. Too far apart, as if whatever made them had an abnormally long stride, and the impressions were deep, as if someone had pressed into the ground with more weight than a person should carry. I knelt, brushing away the needles. The soil beneath was cold, damp. "Base, this is Tower Ridge," I said into the radio, keeping my voice steady. "Found possible prints near the tower. Could be from a lost hiker, but they're unusual. Static." Then Lena's reply, "Copy that, Tower Ridge. Log the coordinates and photograph them. Any direction of travel." I checked the pattern. The prints led north, toward a patch of denser forest that the maps listed as restricted terrain. Old geothermal vents, unstable ground. No one was supposed to go near it. "Northbound," I said. heading into the vents. I'll log and return. Copy. Stay cautious out there, Ethan. She used my first name this time. That tiny human touch hit harder than I expected. I followed the prints for another 100 yards before they vanished into a shallow depression where steam curled up from the ground. The air smelled of sulfur and decay. Birds avoided the area entirely. Something about the silence felt wrong again. Then I noticed the trees. Several pines along the ridge had deep gouges carved into their bark, almost like claw marks, but evenly spaced, deliberate. I'd seen bears mark trees before. This was different. Each cut formed a pattern, vertical and clean, as if made by tools or hands. And on one trunk, I saw something that made my skin crawl. Letters, faint but unmistakable, scratched deep into the wood. Ethan. My heart stuttered. I took a step back, scanning the surrounding trees, half expecting to see movement. The forest stared back, silent and indifferent. I raised the camera and snapped a photo, hands shaking. Then, somewhere behind me, a branch snapped. I spun around, pistol raised. Nothing but trees and shifting shadows. The wind had died completely, leaving the forest in eerie suspension. Another snap, closer this time. "Who's there?" I shouted, voice sharper than I intended. "This is restricted federal land." Silence answered. Then a whisper floated through the trees, carried by no wind at all. "Ethan." It was faint, almost playful, like someone trying to imitate speech. I backed toward the trail, pulse pounding. My flashlight beam darted between the trees, slicing the darkness into fragments. Nothing. The whisper came again, this time closer, the syllables twisting. "Ethan." That voice, too low, too deliberate. I fired once into the air. The gunshot cracked through the woods, echoing off the ridge. Birds exploded from the canopy in a flurry of feathers. The forest came alive with sound again, branches swaying, leaves rustling, but whatever had been there was gone. When I reached the base of the tower, I didn't look back. Inside, I locked the door, checked the bolts twice, then sank into the chair. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely hold the pen to write the report. Discovered unusual tracks and carvings, possible vandalism, heard unidentified voice, returned to post. The words looked pathetic on paper, stripped of everything that made them terrifying. Around dusk, the radio clicked again. "Tower Ridge, this is base. You still up there, Ethan?" "Yeah," I said, voice hoarse. "I'm here." "You sound rattled," Lena said. "Something happened." I hesitated. The truth pressed against my throat like a weight, but saying it out loud made it real, and I wasn't ready for that. "Nothing worth worrying about," I said. "Just wildlife." A pause, then softer. "You sure?" "Yeah, I'll check in again at midnight." "All right," she said. "Be careful, Ethan." Her voice lingered in the static before fading out. Night fell slower than usual. The horizon bled orange into violet before the stars appeared one by one, cold and sharp. The forest below turned into an ocean of shadows again. I told myself I'd imagined it all, the tracks, the carvings, even the whisper. But when I checked the camera to review the photo, something caught my breath mid-chest. The carving of my name was still there, clear in the frame. But in the far left edge of the photo, between two trees, something else was visible. A face, pale, featureless, watching from the dark, and I swear, even through the still image, it was smiling. I must have stared at that photograph for 10 minutes before I convinced myself it couldn't be real. Light flare, pareidolia, anything but what it looked like. Still, I printed it on the tower's old thermal printer, the kind used for fire map photos, and pinned it to the board beside my desk. The longer I looked, the less it resembled coincidence. The face was too symmetrical, too centered between the trees. And those teeth, they looked wrong. I'd seen my share of strange things in national parks. Missing hikers, lights over canyons, animal sounds that defied classification, but never something that stared back. By 10 p.m., a storm was building over the western ridge. The wind pushed through the pines with a low hum that sounded almost like voices. I told myself it was just the way the needles vibrated, but every few gusts I could swear I heard my own name threaded through the wind. "Ethan," I turned on the radio just to drown it out. Lena was off shift now. A ranger named Marcus handled night dispatch. His tone was blunt and clipped, a man who treated words like fuel, use sparingly. "Tower Ridge, weather system moving your way, gusts up to 30, expect power dips." "Copy that," I said. "Any patrols in my quadrant tonight?" "Negative, you're the only one out there. Keep your line open." "Great, exactly what I needed to hear." The power flickered just after 11. The lights dimmed, buzzed, then came back half strength. I grabbed my flashlight and checked the generator gauge. Normal, everything looked fine, until I heard it again. A scrape, soft but deliberate, along the outer wall of the cabin. Something or someone was moving around the exterior platform. I crept to the nearest window, flashlight off, trying to let my eyes adjust. The storm was rolling in fast now, clouds swallowing the moon. Lightning flared across the horizon, throwing the forest into momentary relief. For a heartbeat, I saw a figure standing on the far end of the catwalk, tall, thin, motionless. When darkness returned, it vanished. I moved fast, stepping to the door and twisting the deadbolt just to be sure it was locked. Then I heard a new sound, metal tapping against glass. Once, twice. The window above my cot. I turned, light sweeping the small cabin. The sound came again, tap, 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 like fingernails on the pane. I edged closer, every nerve screaming to stop, but I couldn't. Curiosity has killed more rangers than wildlife ever did. When I reached the window, lightning flashed again. For a split second, I saw a face pressed against the glass. It wasn't human. The skin was pale and stretched, almost translucent, like thin parchment over bone. Its mouth was wrong, too wide, lips drawn back into something that might have been a smile. And its eyes reflected the light the way animal eyes do, bright, metallic, alive. Then the flash ended, and the face was gone. I stumbled back, heart hammering, gun in hand, before I even realized I'd drawn it. My flashlight beam cut across the window, nothing there but rain now. I tried the radio. "Base, this is Tower Ridge. I need—" Static exploded through the speaker, loud enough to make me flinch. Beneath it, faint but unmistakable, came my own voice. "Tower Ridge, this is Tower Ridge." The same inflection, the same breath pattern, word for word. I dropped the mic like it had burned me. The imitation repeated slower this time, as if it were learning. "Tower Ridge, this is Tower Ridge." I pulled the plug from the power unit, killing the line completely. The storm roared outside, thunder rolling so close it shook the floorboards. The lights dimmed again, then died, leaving me in pure blackness. For a few seconds I just stood there, listening to the storm, and beneath it, something else. A low hum, rhythmic, coming from under the floorboards. I crouched, pressed my ear to the wooden planks. The sound was faint, almost electrical, like static traveling through metal, but the tower's wiring ran through the walls, not beneath. Then, faintly, 3 knocks echoed from below. Slow, even, answering my heartbeat. I backed away and aimed the flashlight at the trap door leading to the maintenance ladder. The beam trembled across the handle. The knocks stopped. "Marcus?" I called into the dark, even though I knew the radio was dead. "If that's you, say something." Nothing. The air felt heavier, thick with ozone from the storm. I could taste metal on my tongue. My instincts screamed to barricade the hatch, but instead I found myself kneeling beside it, fingers hovering over the latch. That's when a voice came from below. Not a whisper this time. A voice. "Help me." It was Lena's. Every rational thought I had rebelled at once. She couldn't be here. She was 70 miles away in Mammoth HQ. But the voice was perfect. The same tone, same cadence. "Please, Ethan, it's cold. Please open the door." I froze. My breath came out in short, shallow bursts. The voice trembled again, softer now. "I fell. I can't climb. Help me." I lifted the latch before I could stop myself. The door creaked open an inch, letting cold air rush in from the ladder shaft. My flashlight caught only darkness below. Lena? Silence. Then, from somewhere deep in the shaft, came the faint echo of movement, metal rungs shifting, the sound of someone climbing. I slammed the hatch shut and dropped the locking bar across it. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. Thunder cracked overhead, and for a second I thought I heard laughter riding the sound. I spent the next hour sitting with my back to the hatch, pistol resting on my knee, flashlight aimed at the door. The storm raged outside, battering the tower with wind and rain. Inside, every noise sounded amplified, the creak of wood, the distant rumble of thunder, the faint hiss of my own breath. Eventually, exhaustion won. The adrenaline drained out, leaving a cold emptiness in its place. My mind raced with possibilities: psychosis, stress, isolation sickness. Maybe I'd imagined it all. Maybe the voice had been interference bouncing from the storm. But I knew better. At 3 a.m., the power flickered back on. The soft hum of the generator filled the silence again, almost comforting. I forced myself to stand, to move, to act like the world was normal. That's when I saw the condensation on the inside of the window. 3 streaks dragged downward through the fog, like the marks of long, wet fingers. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. When dawn finally came, Yellowstone looked serene again. Sunlight breaking through, mist lifting off the valleys. The storm had left everything washed clean, renewed. But at the base of the tower, right where the ladder met the ground, the earth was disturbed. The soil had been scraped away, forming deep impressions shaped like hands. Not prints from someone climbing up, prints from something pulling itself down. Morning light has a way of making nightmares look small. From the tower, the forest stretched out in endless green. Steam rising from the valleys, sunlight flashing off wet needles. If I hadn't seen the disturbed ground below, I might have believed the night had been a bad dream. But those hand-shaped impressions were real. 5 of them, spaced like someone had lowered themselves slowly into the soil, fingers digging deep. Each print faced downward, as if whatever was there had descended into the earth itself. I photographed them, measured the spacing, logged everything. Years of field training had taught me one thing: you don't fight the fear, you document it. Facts keep panic from eating you alive. By 8 a.m., I'd transmitted a partial report to HQ. Storm damage, possible vandalism, request site inspection. I left out the rest: the voice, the handprints, the photo, details that would sound insane over radio. When the reply came, it wasn't Lena's voice, but a man I didn't know. "This is operations. Copy your message, Tower Ridge. Hold position until further notice. No patrols inbound today." "Repeat, hold position." The tone was flat, almost rehearsed. Then the line went dead. "Hold position. That's Ranger speak for we don't want you moving until we figure out what's happening." But it also meant I was alone for another day. I stepped outside, trying to shake the claustrophobia. The air still smelled faintly of sulfur. A gray haze drifted low through the trees, the kind of ground fog that moves against the wind. I watched it curl around the trunks, dispersing and reforming like breath. Something glittered near the base of a pine. I climbed down halfway, keeping my weight light on the rungs, and leaned out with my binoculars. It was metal, a badge, Ranger issue. The nameplate caught the sun. D. Wesson, the missing Ranger from the 1989 logbook. I descended the rest of the way, heart thudding. The badge was half buried in mud. The edges corroded, but the engraving clear. I slipped it into an evidence pouch, scanning the area for anything else. That's when I noticed the tree beside it. Long vertical scars ran down the bark, same pattern as before, but older, darker, almost healed over. And beneath the lowest mark, faint carving lines spelled two more letters, H-E. The rest had been erased by weather. It wasn't just my name being written. Whoever or whatever had done this had been learning to write for years. I took 3 steps back and almost tripped over something half hidden in moss. A piece of torn fabric, dark green canvas, the kind used in Ranger jackets. I lifted it and the smell hit me. Copper, damp earth, and time. The tag inside read, "Property of National Park Service." Below it, faint bloodstains had turned brown. I radioed again. "Base, this is Tower Ridge. I've recovered property linked to missing Ranger Dale Wesson. Sending coordinates now." Static. Then, after a few seconds, Lena's voice, unexpected, thin with interference. "Ethan, you're not supposed to be on that channel. Where did you find—" Her voice cut out mid-sentence. "Lena, say again." Nothing. The static shifted into a low hum, then into words that were not hers. "Ethan, help." I froze. The same cadence, the same imitation from last night. I killed the radio and shoved it into my pocket. Something moved in the trees behind me. A shadow slid between trunks 30 yards away, tall, deliberate. I crouched instinctively, drawing my sidearm. The forest held its breath again, that terrible stillness returning like a held note. "Park Service," I shouted. "Identify yourself." No answer. Just the rustle of pine needles, then silence. I backed slowly toward the tower, eyes sweeping the undergrowth. Every sound seemed magnified, the creak of my boots, the faint hiss of wind. When I reached the ladder, I felt the tower's metal frame vibrate faintly under my palm, as if it too was holding tension. Halfway up, a voice drifted from below. "Ethan, wait!" I froze. The tone was calm, urgent, familiar. Lena again. "It's me," it said. "You're not safe up there. Come down." My throat went dry. "Where are you?" "Behind you." I turned. The clearing was empty. Only the trees moved, their tops bending under the wind. "Lena," I said, keeping my voice steady, "if you can hear me, give me a visual." Silence. Then the voice came again, softer now. "Don't make me call your name again." Lightning flashed somewhere distant, and in that white burst I saw it, half hidden behind a trunk at the edge of the clearing. Tall, slender, shoulders too narrow, head tilted like it was studying me. Its skin caught the light, glossy and pale, like something that had never seen the sun. When darkness returned, it was gone. I climbed the rest of the way up in a blur, slammed the hatch, locked it twice, and sat with my back to the door until my breathing slowed. For the next hour, I went through the motions, logging the badge, transferring coordinates, checking the generator, anything to keep my hands moving. But every few minutes I'd glance at the window, half expecting to see that reflection again. At 5 p.m., the sky darkened prematurely, thick clouds rolling in from the west. The storm had circled back. I decided to test the radio one last time. Base. Tower Ridge reporting. Any update on patrol deployment? Nothing. Just static. Then a different frequency buzzed alive on its own, the red indicator light flickering though I hadn't touched the dial. A new voice came through, male, older, measured. Tower Ridge, this is Special Ranger Morse. You're to maintain radio silence unless instructed otherwise. Do you copy? I copy, I said carefully. But who authorized? Just follow procedure, son, and stay inside your tower after dark. The channel went dead. I stared at the speaker, confused. There was no Special Ranger designation in the Park Service. Whoever he was, he had access to frequencies I didn't even know existed. Outside, the wind picked up again. By nightfall, the fog had returned, thick and yellowish near the ground. The smell of sulfur was stronger now, almost chemical. I checked the thermometer. The temperature had dropped 20 degrees in less than an hour. That's when the first knock came at the door. 3 slow raps, precise like before. I leveled the pistol, safety off. Identify yourself. Silence. Then another set of knocks. Same rhythm, lower down this time, near the floorboards. Base, this is Tower Ridge, I've got... I stopped. The radio light was already glowing, speaker hissing. Through the static came a low, distorted version of my own voice. Ethan Cole, open the door. The words stretched unnaturally, vowels bending as if something were tasting them for the first time. I backed toward the far wall, eyes locked on the handle. It began to turn, slow and steady. I fired once through the wood. The recoil rang through the cabin. The handle stopped. Outside, something scraped along the door. A dragging sound that ended with a single thud against the metal frame. Then silence. I waited, counting my heartbeats. 10, 20, 30, nothing. Finally, I stepped forward and looked through the peephole. Only fog. Then, faintly, a reflection. My own face staring back at me from outside. Except it blinked. I staggered backward, gun raised. The power went out again, plunging everything into darkness. Somewhere beyond the door, I heard movement, slow, methodical steps circling the tower. It stopped beneath the floor exactly where the ladder began. And then, from the radio's dead speaker, came a final whisper. You're not alone anymore. Thunder rolled over the ridge, shaking the tower to its bones. That was the moment I realized something fundamental had shifted. The forest wasn't just alive. It was aware, and it knew my name. When dawn came, I almost convinced myself the whisper had been a dream. Almost. The forest below looked too calm, too perfect, as if nature had pressed reset overnight. Mist floated between the pines, sunlight speared through the gaps, and birdsong returned like an apology for everything that had happened. But something was wrong inside Tower Ridge. My coffee mug, which I'd left beside the logbook before midnight, now sat neatly in the center of the desk. The pen I'd dropped on the floor was back in its holder. Every item on the shelves had been rearranged, perfectly straight, as if someone had measured the spacing. Someone, or something, had been inside while I slept. Except I hadn't slept. I stared at the orderly room, heart thudding with that primal unease you can't reason away. This wasn't vandalism, this was communication. When I checked the hatch, the locks were still in place. Same with the door. Windows latched, no sign of forced entry, but the smell lingered, faint, metallic, like rain on hot steel. I powered up the radio, half expecting more interference. The line came alive instantly, hissing faintly before stabilizing into silence. Then, without me touching the dial, the speaker popped and emitted a short digital tone. 3 ascending notes, then static. I frowned. That tone wasn't part of any Park Service protocol. I checked the frequency, locked on 11.3 MHz, a restricted government band. "Base, this is Tower Ridge," I said cautiously. "You transmitting something?" No response. Then the printer whirred behind me. The old thermal unit, one I hadn't used in months, was feeding out a strip of paper. I snatched it before it hit the floor. The words printed in faint gray letters, distorted but legible. "File received. Echo 27. A." The rest was a series of garbled code lines, alphanumeric gibberish that looked like an encrypted transmission. "What the hell?" I muttered, tracing the characters with my thumb. At the bottom, one line stood out. "Project Echo, 1989, classified." The same year Ranger Wesson disappeared. My mouth went dry. I opened the desk drawer, pulled out the old logbook, and flipped to his final entry, the one mentioning the voice calling his name. The handwriting trembled near the bottom as if written in panic. Now, next to it, I had a file that shouldn't exist. Outside, a helicopter's echo reached through the trees, a distant thrum growing louder. I grabbed my binoculars and scanned the horizon. A black aircraft, unmarked except for a faint federal insignia, cut low over the ridge and turned towards the clearing near my tower. Backup, I thought, finally. But as it landed, I saw the people disembark. 3 figures in dark tactical uniforms, not the green or khaki of park rangers. The lead woman removed her headset and looked directly toward my tower, her movements crisp and deliberate. Even from 100 feet up, I could see her expression. Calm, assessing, like someone cataloging a specimen. She lifted a hand, signaling to her team, and they began ascending the path. I met them halfway down, keeping my hand near my holster. The woman stopped first, extended a gloved hand. "Special Agent Mara Jensen, Federal Resource Division." "Ethan Cole," I said cautiously. "Tower Ridge Lookout." "We're aware," she replied. "You reported unusual activity in your sector last night." "Unusual's one way to put it." Her lips twitched, not quite a smile. "We're here to evaluate that." Behind her, one of the men carried a large metal case. The other swept the area with a handheld scanner, emitting faint beeps. They moved like soldiers, not rangers. "What division did you say again?" I asked. "Federal Resource," she repeated smoothly. "Environmental anomalies, seismic irregularities, that kind of thing." "Since when does the Park Service have a paramilitary unit for earthquakes?" She didn't answer. Instead, she adjusted her earpiece. "Cole, we'll need access to your tower and all recorded data from the last 48 hours. "Why?" Her eyes flicked up toward the tower. "Because what's happening here isn't an isolated incident." Something in her tone made my skin prickle. Back inside, Jensen moved through the cabin like she'd been there before. Her team unpacked instruments, scanning air samples, checking electromagnetic fields, even measuring surface temperatures. I stood near the window, arms crossed. "You want to tell me what you're looking for?" "Residual signatures," she said simply. "Energy distortions that sometimes manifest after events." What kind of events? The male tech interrupted. Agent Jensen, you should see this. He showed her a small monitor displaying a digital graph, spiking in irregular intervals. She frowned. It's active. I stepped closer. What's active? Her gaze met mine, level and unflinching. Mr. Cole, how long have you been hearing voices? My stomach dropped. What? You logged an audio anomaly at 01:17 last night, she said, pulling up data from her tablet. Our monitoring stations flagged your tower's transmission pattern. It wasn't human interference. I didn't log that. My report was encrypted. How did you even... Because your radio isn't standard issue, she said quietly. Tower Ridge was part of a research program terminated in 1989, Project Echo. Your station sits on one of 6 testing sites across the western U.S. My pulse pounded. What was it testing? Acoustic reflection experiments, sound mapping of geothermal vents, atmospheric data, things like that. And the voices? Her expression darkened. That's the part we never solved. Outside, thunder rolled again, distant but building. Jensen's team exchanged glances, clearly uneasy. The tech with the scanner adjusted his instrument. Agent, we've got movement, 200 meters northeast. Same resonance pattern. Jensen straightened. Lock this place down. She handed me a headset. If you hear your name again, don't respond. I blinked. Excuse me? Whatever this is, it learns through mimicry. Responding confirms identity, gives it access. Access to what? To you, she said simply. A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the air. Before I could speak, her radio crackled, garbled voices shouting, wind howling. Then a scream cut through the line, raw and human. Her expression hardened. Team 2, report. Static. Stay here, she ordered, checking her weapon. Do not leave the tower. She was gone before I could argue, descending the ladder into the thickening fog. Through the window, I watched the mist roll in waves across the clearing. It wasn't natural fog. It moved like something alive, curling toward the forest edge where the sound had come from. The last thing I saw before the haze swallowed everything was Jensen's silhouette raising her rifle. Then the radio on my desk hissed to life again, whispering in my own voice, Ethan, she's gone. Let me in. The radio hissed for nearly a full minute before going silent again. I stood motionless, pulse hammering in my ears, staring at the speaker as if it might breathe. The room felt too still, like the air itself was waiting for me to reply. When the sound finally cut out, I forced myself to breathe, to move. I grabbed the printed file, Echo 27A, and laid it flat on the desk beneath the pale morning light. The paper was thin, the ink faint, but the words at the top seemed to pulse with meaning. Project Echo, Phase 4, Field Test Log Classification, Level 7, Internal Access Only. The first paragraph read like a scientific report. Acoustic resonant mapping in geothermal caverns yielded significant results. Transmission echo profiles contain anomalous harmonics, outside measurable frequency ranges, approx. 1722/8. Further analysis suggests biological pattern interference within signal decay. Biological pattern interference. Something about those words made my skin crawl. I kept reading. Following Incident 27A, test operations were suspended. Subject Wesson presumed KIA. Recommendation: immediate shutdown of tower-linked transmitters. Containment protocol initiated. There it was. Wesson, the missing ranger. My eyes darted to the logbook, still lying open on the desk. His last entry matched the date of this report. The same night he wrote about hearing a voice calling his name. I flipped to the back page of the printout. The last line had been underlined in red ink. It learns through reflection. I didn't know what that meant, but every instinct I had told me it wasn't metaphorical. The radio crackled again, softly this time, almost shy. Static, then breathing, not mine. "Ethan," it whispered. The voice was so faint I almost thought it was imagination. But when it spoke again, it wasn't a perfect imitation. It stuttered slightly, learning my rhythm. "Ethan." I turned the volume down to a whisper, heart racing. "Who are you?" The response came slowly, each word drawn out like it was tasting them. "I am." Reflection. Then silence. Outside, the fog hadn't lifted. The forest below looked drowned in gray, shapes moving faintly where there should have been none. I tried Jensen's radio channel. "Agent Jensen, come in." Static, then something else. Faint shuffling, distant wind. The sound of fabric brushing against a microphone. "Jensen?" A new voice answered, low and uneven. "She can't hear you anymore." That was enough. I locked the radio in a metal case and shoved it under the desk. If it wanted to talk, it would have to find another way. The logical part of me, the part that had survived wildfires, grisly attacks, and 3 winters of isolation, insisted this was all explainable. Faulty equipment, storm interference, paranoia. The human brain is built to find patterns even where none exist. But logic doesn't leave fingerprints. When I turned to reach for my notebook, I froze. On the inside of the window, the inside, 5 clear prints marked the condensation. Long, narrow fingers, too long to be human. They weren't there a second ago. I wiped them off with my sleeve, forcing my mind to stay practical. Document everything. Don't panic. I set up the tower's surveillance camera, an old motion-triggered model used to record lightning strikes, and aimed it at the hatch. The small red indicator light blinked once, then glowed steady. Then I started decoding the rest of the file. Most of the Echo 27A document was gibberish, strings of numbers, timestamps, coordinates. But near the middle, a note appeared in plain English, written in a different font as if someone had added it later. "It doesn't mimic sound, it mimics memory." My chest tightened. I read it again, slower. "Mimics memory." That would explain how it used Lena's voice. Maybe even how it rearranged the tower, how it knew what I'd touched. And then it hit me. If it mimics memory, it could imitate more than voices. It could learn from anything electronic, recordings, data logs, even written words. That meant it might be learning from me right now. I unplugged the computer. The screen went black instantly, but a faint glow lingered, like an afterimage burned into the glass. Letters began to form on their own, faint and shaky. "Do not turn off." I took a step back, stomach twisting. The monitor brightened again and displayed new text. "You want answers. I can show you." "What are you?" I whispered aloud. The cursor blinked once. Then words appeared, one by one. "You called my name first." I felt cold all over. "No," I said. "You called mine." That's how it starts. I wanted to rip the plug from the wall, but something about the message, its calmness, rooted me in place. They built the towers to hear the earth. They forgot the earth listens back. The screen flickered, lines of code scrolling too fast to read. Then a single line remained. "Echo has been listening since 1989. The monitor shut itself off. Silence filled the tower again, heavy, suffocating. Outside, the fog pressed against the windows, thicker than before. I backed toward the cot, sat down hard. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I'd spent years learning to respect the wilderness, to understand that nature doesn't care about you, it just is. But this wasn't indifference. This was something else, something intelligent. And if the file was right, something that had been listening for decades. At noon, the fog began to thin just enough for me to see movement at the forest edge. 3 figures. For a second, I thought Jensen's team had returned. But when I raised the binoculars, my breath caught. They weren't wearing uniforms. Their clothes looked old, tattered, like hikers who'd been lost for weeks. They walked slowly, unsteadily, eyes blank and unfocused. One of them turned his face toward the tower, and I nearly dropped the binoculars. It was Dale Wesson. I'd seen his photo in the archives, 30 years younger, but the same sharp jawline, same scar under the eye. Only his skin now was gray, stretched too tight over bone, and his mouth hung slightly open as if trying to speak. "Jesus Christ," I whispered. The others stopped beside him, turning their heads in perfect unison toward me. Then, as if responding to a silent command, all 3 raised their right hands and pointed directly at the tower. The radio on my desk came alive again. No static this time, just a perfect, clear voice. My own. "They've been waiting for you, Ethan." For a moment, I couldn't move. The sight of them, those 3 shapes at the edge of the woods, motionless yet staring straight up at me, froze me where I stood. Their stillness was wrong. It wasn't the natural hesitation of people uncertain where to go. It was deliberate, rehearsed, as if waiting for a cue. Then the radio on my desk repeated, calm and steady, my own voice again. "They've been waiting for you, Ethan." I forced myself to step back. The instinct to run was primal, pounding through my muscles, but the tower was my only advantage. Height, visibility, distance. I kept the binoculars locked on the clearing. The 3 figures didn't move. Wind swept across the treetops, bending them in waves. In that motion, I saw something subtle. Their clothes shifted not with the wind, but against it, like their movements lagged behind the world. "Base, this is Tower Ridge," I said into the mic, ignoring the echo of my own voice in the speaker. "Do you copy?" Static. I tried Jensen's emergency band. "Agent Jensen, come in." Nothing but faint distortion, then a burst of sound that made my skin crawl. Breathing, wet, heavy, like someone pressing their mouth right against the transmitter. "Say something," I demanded, anger winning over fear. A voice answered, low and close. "You shouldn't have looked." My stomach turned to ice. I dropped the mic, stumbled backward, knocking into the chair. The message repeated once, softer now, fading into a hiss. Outside, movement broke the pattern. The figure that looked like Dale Wesson took 1 step forward, then another. The other 2 followed, their movements slow, synchronized, almost graceful. They weren't walking, they were being pulled. I bolted for the cabinet and grabbed my rifle. One part of me, the part still trained to protect and report, wanted to fire a warning shot. But another part whispered something colder. What if they weren't alive enough to hear it? I sighted the scope on the clearing. As I did, lightning flashed again, lighting the forest in brilliant white for half a second. The 3 figures were closer now, too close. The flash faded, and they were gone. Every cell in my body screamed. I spun toward the ladder hatch, gun ready. The steel vibrated slightly under my boots, the faint rhythm of movement against the tower legs. Something was climbing. "Base!" I shouted again into the dead radio. "If anyone hears this, I've got contact at Tower Ridge. Repeat, contact." The response came immediately. Lena's voice, calm and clear. "Ethan, stop!" Relief hit me like a shot of air. "Lena, Jesus, thank God!" There's something out there. 3 people, or don't go near them, she interrupted, voice sharp now. We received the file too. It's active. You need to... The signal fractured mid-word, splitting into 2 overlapping tones. One continued speaking as Lena, the other, quieter, used her exact voice but different words. Let them in. I froze. Lena. Only the second voice answered now. Open the door. It's cold out here. I shut off the transmitter. The knocks began again, echoing up the tower's frame. Slow, metallic, rhythmic. This time they weren't from one direction. They came from everywhere. I backed toward the center of the cabin, eyes flicking between windows. The sound rose in tempo, bang, 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 like rain on steel, except each strike landed too evenly spaced, too deliberate. Then it stopped. Silence pressed in, thick and absolute. I dared a glance outside. The forest was empty again, but the fog below churned, spiraling upward in columns around the tower's legs. In that swirl of mist, something darker moved, fluid, shifting. That's when the generator died. The light blinked out. Only the glow of my watch remained. 3:42 p.m. I clicked the flashlight on. The beam flickered once, twice, then steadied. I turned toward the hatch, breath shallow. The metal latch was bending upward. I fired once through the hatch, the shot deafening in the small space. Splinters flew. The latch fell back. Silence returned, but I could still feel vibration in the floor, like something testing the structure's strength. I reloaded, hands slick with sweat. Not this time, I whispered to no one. The computer, still unplugged, flickered on by itself. The screen filled with static, then cleared to show text. Door unlocked. My eyes flew to the hatch. The bolt I'd driven into the frame was twisted clean off. I backed toward the far wall, aiming the flashlight and gun at the hatch as the door creaked open an inch. The smell of wet earth and ozone flooded the room. A hand appeared, pale, slick, human, but not. It grasped the edge, fingers bending too far backward before pulling away. Then, from the radio, Jensen's voice. Ethan, hold your fire. I'm at the base, don't shoot. I blinked hard. Jensen, you're alive. Yes, the voice said smoothly. I need you to open the hatch. It's not safe for me out here. It sounded perfect, controlled. Too perfect. I pointed the flashlight down the hatch opening. The beam cut through steam and shadow, glinting off metal rungs. Then faintly a face lifted into view. Agent Jensen's. Same features, same calm eyes. But the pupils didn't adjust to the light. They stayed wide, black, unblinking. Ethan, it said smiling, you can trust me. Something primal broke inside me. I kicked the hatch closed, latched it with my entire weight, and fired 2 more rounds through the floor. The face vanished. For a long time, all I heard was the ringing in my ears and my own ragged breathing. When the silence finally settled again, I collapsed against the wall, shaking. I didn't know what I was fighting anymore. Ghost, echo, something born of the earth. But I knew one thing. It wanted me to open that door. When I finally dared to look through the window again, the fog had thinned slightly. Down in the clearing, 3 shapes stood side by side, motionless once more. But there was a fourth now, a woman in a dark uniform, her head tilted toward the tower. Even from this distance I could see her smile. The woman's face was unmistakable even through the fog. Agent Jensen, same jawline, same posture, but the way she tilted her head was wrong, as if her neck didn't quite remember where the bones should stop. A cold certainty spread through me. Jensen was either dead or nowhere near Yellowstone. I switched frequencies, desperate for proof. Base Tower Ridge, confirm Agent Mara Jensen's location. Static hissed for several seconds before a faint male voice answered. Hurried, distant. Tower Ridge, this is Grand Teton Command. Jensen checked in from Bozeman 40 minutes ago. She's not in your sector. My stomach hollowed out. Say that again? She's in Montana, Ranger Cole. Who's with you? I stared through the glass at the figure below. She raised one hand in a slow wave, mocking, deliberate. Nothing, I said. Nobody's here. Then I cut the transmission before the operator could respond. The false Jensen began to move. Each step forward dragged the fog with her, the gray mass folding around her body until the clearing looked like a living organism. I lifted the rifle, sighted center mass, and fired once. The echo rang across the valley. When the smoke cleared, she was gone. No trace, no body, only a single ripple in the mist where the bullet had passed. I lowered the weapon, pulse hammering. Then I heard it, a metallic click from the computer behind me. The monitor, still disconnected from power, blinked to life again. Lines of code streamed across the screen faster than I could read, then stopped on a single message. Project Echo, phase reactivated. My blood went cold. The file Lena had warned me about, the encrypted packet, had somehow installed itself without power or connection. Another line appeared beneath it. Subject identification? Cole Ethan, active host. I stepped back, horrified. The cursor blinked once, then the screen divided, showing 2 windows. On the left, live footage from my tower interior, me staring at the monitor. On the right, a thermal image of the forest below, dozens of moving shapes I hadn't seen through the window. Not 3, not 4, dozens. The same outline repeated over and over, each one me. The air in the cabin shifted, charged with static electricity. Hair lifted on my arms. Somewhere inside the radio stack, relays began snapping open and shut in rapid succession. A stuttering Morse code that made no sense. Then the monitor flashed white and a new voice filled the room. Female, calm, and artificial. Ethan Cole, proceed to extraction coordinates. Your signal integrity is compromised. Who is this? I demanded. Lena Voss, the voice said. But it wasn't her. The cadence was off, hollow. The tone scraped of emotion like someone had built a perfect recording out of her words. I'm coming to help you, it said again. Open the hatch. I looked at the hatch door. The bolt had reformed, straight, unbent, as if the metal had never been twisted. The radio hissed, switching channels without my touch, cycling through frequencies until one caught and held. The real Lena's voice broke through, hoarse, panicked. Ethan, listen to me. It's using the relay network. It's in the infrastructure. Don't... Her words cut out, replaced by the false version repeating them in perfect rhythm. Don't open the door. Then both voices overlapped, phasing into a single digital roar that vibrated the glass panes. I yanked the power cord from the wall. Sparks flared. The screen went black. Outside, thunder cracked, so close it rattled the floor. The fog pulsed outward like a heartbeat. For the first time since the screams the previous night, I felt the forest itself move. Not the trees, not the wind, but something beneath the soil. A deep groan rippled through the ground, traveling up the tower legs. My coffee mug toppled from the desk, shattering. The tremor faded, replaced by the faint whir of the radio rebooting on its own. I lifted the mic with shaking hands. Base, this is Tower Ridge. If anyone hears this, whatever Project Echo is, it's active again. The signal's compromised. Lock down the... A new voice interrupted me, crisp, professional. Copy that, Tower Ridge. This is Agent Mara Jensen. We have your location. Hold tight. We're inbound for extraction. I froze, because I could still see her reflection in the dark window, smiling up at me from the clearing. The radio clicked once more, then her tone softened, almost tender. Stay on the line with me, Ethan. You don't want to be alone out there. I backed away from the console until my shoulders hit the cold log wall. The static thinned, leaving a single frequency humming at the edge of hearing. I could swear it sounded like breathing. Then, very faintly beneath the hum, came Lena's real voice, barely audible, almost swallowed by the noise. Ethan, it knows the frequencies now. The transmission cut. Silence returned, heavy and absolute. The fog outside swallowed the world. And for the first time since arriving at Tower Ridge, I realized the forest wasn't surrounding me anymore. It was listening. Dawn bled into the fog like ink into water. For the first time in hours, I saw color, muted bands of gray and pale orange seeping through the trees. The storm had passed, but the air still hummed with static. Every instinct told me to stay inside the tower, lock the door, and wait for help. But after what I'd heard on the radio, help could mean anything. I packed fast. Sidearm, map, field recorder, and one of the experimental rounds Jensen had left behind months ago. The air outside was colder than it should have been for early September, and the smell of sulfur carried through the mist. When my boots hit the ground, the fog swallowed me whole. The forest was silent again. No birds, no insects, not even the wind. The quiet had weight. Each breath came out white, vanishing almost immediately. I followed the service trail north toward the ridgeline, checking my compass every few steps. The magnetic needle twitched, refusing to hold steady. Half a mile down the path, I saw it. A second set of footprints beside mine, leading ahead of me. Fresh. Same boot pattern, same size. My chest tightened. Someone, or something, had walked this trail moments earlier. I crouched and touched one of the impressions, still warm. For a moment, I thought about turning back, climbing into the safety of Tower Ridge and pretending none of this existed. But that was the old ranger in me, the one who thought every mystery had a form to file and a chain of command to follow. The man standing in that fog knew better. The map Jensen had sent earlier glowed faintly on my tablet screen, even without full GPS reception. A red dot blinked about 2 miles northwest. Site 12, Substation Echo. I pushed on. The forest changed as the light grew. Trees leaned inward, their trunks blackened by years of fire scars. The ground dipped into a shallow basin filled with steam vents, each one exhaling ribbons of vapor that twisted across the trail. Through the haze, a shape emerged, a small concrete structure with a collapsed antenna mast and a rusted National Park Service emblem barely visible on its side. Site 12. It looked abandoned decades ago, but the door was ajar. I raised the rifle, nudged the metal open with the barrel, and stepped inside. The smell hit first. Ozone, oil, and something faintly sweet, like rotting pine sap. Dust coated everything, but there were clear drag marks across the floor, recent. The interior was a single room lit by slats of sunlight through cracked shutters. Old reel-to-reel machines lined one wall. A stack of labeled tapes filled the shelves above them. On the opposite side, a desk still held a rotary phone, and a water-damaged binder stamped Project Echo See Archival. I brushed the dust away and flipped it open. Inside were photographs, black and white prints showing a group of scientists beside large speakers mounted in the forest. The captions were clinical, Field Test Number 7, Acoustic Stimulus to Ursus arctos horribilis, 1964. Another photo showed a caged elk surrounded by strange metallic panels, its eyes reflecting light like mirrors. The binder notes described sonic replication protocols designed to trigger fear response and herd migration via recorded human distress patterns. They had tried to weaponize sound. As I turned the next page, a smaller photo slipped free. A man in ranger uniform stood beside one of the test speakers, hand raised as if explaining something. The name stitched above his badge stopped my breath. Wesson D. Dale Wesson, the man who disappeared months earlier. My hands trembled as I reached for the nearby reel player. A label on one of the tapes read, "Control Sample, Vocal Echo Test 4. I threaded it through the reels and flipped the switch. At first there was only static, then a faint crackle of wind and water. After a few seconds, a voice spoke. Low, nervous male. Test 4, subject vocal imprint recorded. Initiating playback loop. A pause. Then another voice answered, identical to the first, but distorted metallic. You shouldn't have looked. My stomach turned. It was the same phrase that had haunted me since the first night. The real Wesson's voice came again on the tape. Louder now, panicked. Cut the feed, cut the... A burst of static swallowed the rest. Something thudded outside. I froze, listening. The sound came again. A heavy step on damp earth followed by another. Slow, careful, circling the substation. I switched off the recorder and drew my pistol. Through the narrow window, I could just make out movement in the fog. A silhouette walking past the vent field. Broad shoulders, ranger jacket, the same gait I'd seen in old training footage. "Wesson," I called before my brain could stop my mouth. The figure stopped, turned. Even through the fog, I saw that the head wasn't quite right, tilted as if it were listening to a sound only it could hear. Then it started walking toward the station. I backed away from the window, heart hammering. The footsteps grew faster, heavier. I grabbed the reel of tape, stuffed it into my pack, and looked for a back exit. A small maintenance hatch led to a crawl space beneath the floorboards, barely wide enough for me to squeeze through. The door burst inward before I made it. Dust exploded in the air. The silhouette filled the frame, backlit by the pale light outside. "Ethan," it said in my voice. I fired once. The shot hit center mass. The thing staggered, looked down at the hole in its chest, and smiled. Smoke rose from the wound, like steam. It whispered again, my voice, softer now. "Don't run." I ran. The crawl space dumped me into a trench of wet clay behind the station. I crawled on hands and knees until I reached the tree line, gasping. When I turned back, the doorway stood empty, but the sound of my own voice still echoed from within the building, looping endlessly. "You shouldn't have looked." I looked anyway and saw a second set of footprints leading away from the station, identical to mine. They headed toward the vents. The fog had thinned, but the valley still breathed. Each vent exhaled steam in slow, rhythmic bursts that reminded me of lungs struggling for air. The mirrored footprints led straight through the field, the impressions filling with water as if the ground itself wanted to erase them. I moved carefully, one step between plumes, rifle raised. The sulfur burned my throat and sweat mixed with condensation on my face. Every few seconds I caught a faint shimmer in the distance, heat distortions that almost looked like people walking through the mist. The vents hissed louder. Beneath that sound came another, stranger note, like a hum tuned just below hearing. When I stopped, it stopped. When I breathed, it echoed. I crouched beside a vent rimmed with black crystals, and found something buried in the mud, a fragment of fabric, melted nylon. The remains of a Park Service patch still clung to it. Wesson's. The ground shuddered suddenly, a deep vibration that rattled the gear in my pack. I pressed a hand to the earth. The hum grew stronger, almost electrical, pulsing in time with my heartbeat. It felt alive. My radio crackled. Tower Ridge, this is Rescue Unit 12. Do you copy? Static flooded the channel before I could respond. Then a woman's voice broke through, steady, professional. Ranger Cole, we're approaching from the South Access Road. Sitrep? Relief hit like cold rain. Copy, Unit 12. I'm northwest of Tower Ridge, near Geothermal Field Delta. Be advised, multiple hostiles, not human. Proceed with caution. A pause, then, understood. ETA 10 minutes. The line went dead. I kept moving uphill, away from the thickest steam, until the ground leveled out at a ridge overlooking the basin. From there I could see the substation's roof below, and beyond it, a narrow road winding through the pines. Headlights cut through the fog. 3 vehicles crawling toward me. Rescue Unit 12 was real after all. When they reached the clearing, doors opened and figures emerged. 2 rangers in orange jackets and a man in tactical black carrying a satellite pack. The lead ranger raised a hand. Cole? I stepped from the trees, lowering my weapon. Yeah, over here. They jogged up the slope. The leader, a woman in her 40s with short gray hair, offered a quick, tired smile. Captain Marcy Hale, you picked a hell of a place for a morning walk. Wish I could say it was voluntary. The tech adjusted the satellite rig on his back, eyes scanning the horizon. We've been getting interference since we entered the valley. Something's broadcasting across every emergency frequency. Yeah, I said. That's how it starts. We formed a perimeter around the vents while Hale radioed their command post. She kept her voice calm, but her eyes betrayed unease. Copy base, we've linked with Cole. Preparing extraction in 20. Static answered. She frowned, tried again. Base. Confirm transmission. The reply came instantly, but it wasn't base. Confirmed, a voice said. Mine. Everyone froze. The tech glanced at me, pale. Sir, your mic's off. Before I could speak, the radio repeated the single word, drawn out like a whisper. Confirmed. Then all 3 of our radios lit up at once, broadcasting overlapping voices, our voices, each repeating fragments of our conversation from seconds earlier, scrambled and reversed. The air thickened with noise until I ripped my headset free. Hale's hand went to her weapon. What the hell is this? I pointed toward the vents. The steam had changed color, darkening, roiling as though stirred from below. Within it, faint silhouettes shifted and twisted, forming human shapes that vanished as quickly as they appeared. Move, I shouted. We retreated uphill as the first vent erupted. Scalding air and gravel blasted skyward, followed by a low, mournful tone that vibrated in my chest. The tech stumbled, clutching his ears. Frequency attack, he yelled. It's broadcasting through the seismic sensors. Another vent blew, closer this time. The noise wasn't just sound. It was memory, fragments of speech from the tapes, voices of every ranger who'd gone missing. They layered together until the forest itself seemed to speak. Help us, help us, help us! Hale grabbed my arm. Back to the trucks now. We ran, but the fog was alive again, closing like curtains. Somewhere behind us, the tech screamed. I turned just in time to see him collapse beside a vent, his body convulsing as if struck by invisible current. His headset sparked, glowing red before melting against his skin. Hale dragged me onward. "Leave him!" We reached the nearest truck, slamming doors and gunning the engine. The radio dashboard flickered through channels on its own. Every station carried the same sound, a heartbeat matching the pulse beneath the ground. "Captain," I said, "we need to kill the power. It travels on current." She nodded and yanked the ignition key. Silence. For a moment, we just sat there, panting. Then, from the darkness beyond the windshield, a shape appeared in the high beams of another truck, a man walking slowly toward us. The fog parted around him, revealing a familiar uniform and a face I'd seen in too many photos. "Dale Wesson," Hale whispered. That's impossible." He stopped 5 yards away and lifted something in his hand, a worn radio mic still connected to a severed cord. His mouth opened, but the voice that came out was mine. "Marcy Hale, you have to let me in." She gripped the wheel, shaking her head. "He's not talking, Ethan." The fake Wesson tilted his head, listening. Then, smiling, he spoke again. "You brought me home." The radio on the dashboard came to life. Dozens of overlapping voices, all of us, past and present, chanted one word in unison: echo. The headlights flickered out. When the lights died, the world folded in on itself. No stars, no horizon, just a wet darkness pressing against the glass. Captain Hale's hand found the ignition key again, but I stopped her. "Don't," I whispered. "It's in the current." The engine ticked softly as it cooled. Outside, steam curled across the hood like breath on glass. For a few heartbeats, nothing moved. Then something brushed the truck's fender, a long, slow scrape that ended with a metallic tap against the door handle. Hale drew her sidearm. "We're not staying here." We slipped out opposite doors and met behind the truck bed. The fog glowed faintly from geothermal vents farther downslope, painting the mist in sickly yellow light. Through it, I could still make out the silhouette of Wesson standing where we'd left him. He hadn't moved, but the radio mic in his hand glimmered like a coal. A faint sound drifted toward us, our own voices repeating the words we'd just spoken, slower, lower. "Don't." "It's in the current." Hale flinched. "Jesus." "Come on," I said. "The ridge road's a 1/4 mile north. We can climb out of the basin and call from higher ground." We kept low, moving between vents. The ground trembled underfoot, each quake followed by that same pulse of subsonic noise that seemed to beat in time with my pulse. At the crest of the slope, we found an old Ranger utility shed, half swallowed by roots. The door hung open and something inside flickered, a weak emergency light running on its last battery. Hale swept her flashlight through the doorway first. Inside, a cot, a broken desk, and boxes of field journals covered in mold. The light blinked against a metal cabinet stenciled property of NPS, Experimental Division. She kicked it open. Inside, waterlogged folders slid to the floor. I crouched and flipped one open. The title page was stamped Project Echo Decommission Order 1971. Half the ink had bled, but a paragraph near the bottom was still readable. Residual phenomena detected within geothermal resonance chamber. Staff instructed to maintain audio silence during shifts. Mimicry classified as semi-organic resonance feedback. Containment impossible once pattern learned. Hale exhaled slowly. "So this thing, whatever it is, wasn't an accident?" "No," I said. "It was built." A rustling outside cut me off. Something large moved past the shed, crunching gravel. Hale motioned for silence, and we killed the light. Through the crack in the wall, I saw it. A human outline gliding between the trees, shoulders brushing the trunks, but making no sound. Then a whisper, right by my ear, though Hale was 3 feet away. "Ethan!" I spun. Empty air. The whisper came again, closer, but this time it wasn't a voice in the room. It was inside the walls, vibrating the metal panels around us. The whole shed groaned. Hale grabbed the map off the desk and jammed it into her vest. "Move. Now." We broke from the shed and ran uphill toward the ridge road. Steam vents hissed around us. A faint orange light pulsed somewhere deep in the valley, like an ember breathing. Halfway up the slope, my radio sputtered back to life. Static, then a burst of code. Short, long, short, short. Morse. I recognized the pattern. Lena. I yanked the mic to my mouth. "Lena, it's Ethan. We're alive. Hale's with me. We found Site 12. Whatever's down here, it's awake." The reply was faint but unmistakably human this time. Her voice frayed with exhaustion. "Ethan, listen carefully. The signals, it learns voices, not faces. The mimics reconstruct tone through residual heat signatures. That's why the vents matter." "Can we kill it?" Hale asked, leaning close. "Contain it," Lena said. "You'll need the vault. Mammoth Hot Springs. The original containment chamber still exists. I'm sending coordinates." The signal wavered. Behind her words, something else bled through. Another Lena, speaking in perfect rhythm but lagging a half-beat behind. "Ethan, you're not alone." "Not for long." I smacked the radio against my knee, desperate to clear it. "Lena, which one's real?" Her voice returned sharp, urgent. "If it speaks without breath, don't answer it. It needs the response to finish the pattern." Then silence. Hale and I reached the ridge road as the first light of morning finally broke through the trees. Below us, the entire basin shimmered like water. The fog wasn't dispersing. It was condensing, thickening into shapes that looked disturbingly human. She stared, jaw tight. "Tell me that's heat distortion." "I'd lie if it helped," I said. We started along the road toward the extraction point marked on Lena's coordinates. The terrain was slick, and every sound echoed twice, once naturally, once half a second later, too perfect to be coincidence. After 10 minutes, Hale stopped. "You hear that?" I did. Footsteps behind us, exactly matching our rhythm. When we stopped, they stopped. I turned slowly. The fog filled the road 20 yards back, empty except for 2 faint silhouettes walking in step with us. Our own. Hale's voice dropped to a whisper. "They're learning." The road curved toward higher ground, and through the thinning mist I saw a ranger truck, parked sideways across the lane. Our earlier convoy vehicle. Its doors hung open, headlights still dead. We approached cautiously. Inside, the tech who'd died near the vents sat upright in the driver's seat, eyes open. "Don't touch him," I said. Hale leaned in through the passenger door anyway, reaching for his ID. The body exhaled, a rasp dry as sandpaper. "Stay on the line with me, Ethan." She stumbled back, gun raised. The corpse turned its head just enough that the neck popped. Then it smiled. Her smile copied perfectly. Every radio in the truck burst to life at once, replaying the same phrase in an infinite loop. "Stay on the line with me." The air vibrated until glass shattered from the windshield. "Run," I shouted. We bolted into the tree line as the truck's dashboard exploded behind us, scattering sparks. The echoes followed, our own words folding over themselves in layers, turning language into a roar. By the time we reached the crest of the hill, the valley below was alive with movement. Dozens of pale shapes rising from the vents, each wearing someone's face, and in the middle of them all, a single dark figure lifted its head toward us and spoke through every voice at once. See what you made of me." We didn't stop running until the sound finally broke behind us. Up on the ridge, the forest thinned and wind tore the fog apart in long ribbons. I could still see the basin below, boiling with motion that looked like water but moved too precisely, too aware. Hale bent over, hands on her knees, breath coming out in white bursts. "Tell me we're done with this place," she said. "Not even close." The radio on my belt clicked, once, twice, like a heartbeat trying to restart. I switched it off before it could speak again. We followed the gravel road until the trees opened into a narrow overlook. The view stretched for miles, ridges stacked like storm waves, smoke rising from the geothermal vents. To the north, sunlight burned through the haze and lit the silver line of a service tower, one I hadn't seen on any map. "That's the relay," Hale said. "If Lena's coordinates are right, the vault's somewhere beyond that ridge." The wind shifted, carrying with it the faint scent of iron and pine sap. For the first time in days, I could hear normal sounds again. Distant birds, melting snow dripping from branches. For a moment, it almost felt safe. Then Hale found the body. It lay half buried in snow beside the overlook guardrail, a man in a black field jacket with the words Federal Resource Division stenciled across the back. His skin had gone gray-blue, but his face was intact. Jensen's tech, the one who'd vanished when her team came up to Tower Ridge. Something metallic gleamed in his hand, a data drive sealed in a waterproof casing. Hale crouched, pried it free, and slipped it into her vest. "Maybe answers," she said. We moved to an abandoned ranger shelter nearby, a one-room cabin built decades ago for wildfire lookouts. Inside, a single solar lamp still held charge. I plugged the drive into my tablet and prayed the screen would stay dark between updates. The file tree loaded immediately. Thousands of compressed logs, all stamped Echo Archive, restricted. I opened the earliest one, 1963, test objective, utilize low-frequency sound to influence animal navigation behavior. Result, positive. Unintended secondary resonance detected in subsurface vents. Another file dated years later, 1971, containment unsuccessful. Subject self-replicates using acoustic feedback. Recommend relocation of tower equipment to remote sites under civilian cover. And then the most recent entry, marked only months ago. Phase 4, reactivation authorized. Tower Ridge, chosen for signal triangulation. Personnel unbriefed to maintain behavioral authenticity. I stared at the last line until my vision blurred. They used us as bait. Hale rubbed her face with both hands. They turned the whole park into an antenna. Outside, thunder muttered over the mountains. The fog down in the basin was gone now, replaced by a dull shimmer that looked almost like heat mirage spreading outward. Another folder on the drive caught my eye. Personnel audio log Wesson. I hesitated, then hit play. Static. Then Wesson's voice, weary and frightened. Day 43. I hear them under the vents now, not echoes, faces in the sound. When I speak, they repeat. When I stop, they wait. I think it's learning my cadence. A long pause followed by the scrape of a chair. If anyone finds this, don't try to answer it. It doesn't need belief. It needs recognition. The log ended with 3 faint knocks, perfectly spaced. Hale whispered. He knew what it was becoming. The lamp flickered. For an instant, the shadows on the wall looked wrong. 2 silhouettes where there should have been one for each of us. They moved a beat out of sync, lagging just behind. I killed the light. We can't stay here. We packed in silence, stepping back into the cold. Dusk had started its slow crawl over the ridges. The forest was quiet again, but not empty. It felt like a room after someone stops talking. Half a mile ahead, the relay tower rose above the treetops, its metal frame humming softly. The sound vibrated through the ground like a tuning fork. At its base, a narrow tunnel led into the rock, its entrance marked by a faded warning sign. Vault access. Authorized personnel only. I looked at Hale. She gave a single nod. We finished this. Before we stepped inside, I switched the radio back on. For a few seconds, there was only static. Then Lena's real voice broke through, urgent but clear. Ethan, whatever you do, don't destroy the vault. It's not a prison. It's the only thing keeping them contained. Who's them? I asked. Her breath caught. The recordings. Every time someone answers, the signal grows a body. That's how they remember faces. The transmission cracked and died. We stood at the mouth of the tunnel, the wind behind us carrying the faintest trace of words. Our own, whispered back. Hale checked her weapon, jaw set. You ready? I looked once more at the valley below, where dozens of pale shapes still moved in the fading light, each one looking up toward us. No, I said, but we're going anyway. We stepped into the dark, the sound of our footsteps echoing off stone, one pair real, one pair half a second behind. The tunnel swallowed the last of the daylight behind us. I kept my flashlight low, its beam cutting across the narrow concrete walls that glistened with condensation. Every sound we made, our footsteps, the jingle of Hale's gear, came back doubled like something was walking just out of sync with us. The air grew warmer the deeper we went, thick with the scent of minerals and ozone. My watch read 10:43 p.m., though time felt meaningless here. We'd left the living world behind. This place wasn't built by the Park Service, Hale muttered. Her voice echoed flatly, stripped of emotion by the acoustics. The concrete's military grade, early Cold War construction, maybe late 50s. Which lines up with the first file on that drive, I said. Project Echo started in 63. They didn't just pick Yellowstone because it was remote. They picked it because of the vents. We reached a rusted steel door embedded in the rock. Stenciled letters barely visible beneath corrosion read, Vault Entry, Project Echo, Clearance Omega. Hale placed her hand against the locking wheel and gave it a slow turn. Metal squealed like an animal in pain. The door released a breath of hot, metallic air. The corridor beyond was wider, lined with conduit, old warning lights still glowing faint red. I could hear machinery humming somewhere ahead, steady and slow like a mechanical heartbeat. Power's still running, Hale whispered, after 60 years. We passed through a series of checkpoints, each one with shattered glass panels and half-burned equipment. The deeper chambers looked half-collapsed, filled with mineral growths that shimmered faintly in our flashlight beams. It wasn't ice or salt. The crystalline patterns pulsed, almost like breathing. At the bottom of a sloping ramp, the corridor opened into a vast circular space. The vault. It was larger than any underground facility I'd ever seen. A cathedral carved out of volcanic stone. In the center rose a cylindrical structure made of metal and quartz, cables running up into the ceiling like veins feeding a heart. Around its base, vents exhaled slow plumes of steam that glowed faintly blue. We stood in silence for a long moment, taking it in. The place felt alive. "What is this?" Hale whispered. I pointed to a rusted sign bolted to the nearest console. Subsonic memory array, do not approach while active. I scanned the consoles. Most were dead, but one screen still flickered. Lines of green text scrolled across it, looping endlessly. Containment nominal. Signal integrity 73%. Biometric archive stable. I touched the keyboard. The screen jumped, flooding with archived logs. Each entry carried a timestamp decades old. Log 0182, Dr. Alan Vickers, lead researcher. Preliminary success. The quartz matrix responds to frequency encoding. We've stored a vocal pattern indefinitely in the mineral lattice. The crystal sings it back perfectly. Log 0269. We've created something self-sustaining. The lattice grows on its own now, not just storing sound, replicating it. Log 0344. The voices won't stop even when power's cut. The vents resonate on their own frequency now. It's like the park itself remembers. Hale stepped back from the console. They turned the Earth into a recording device. Not just recording, I said. It's evolving. The signal learned to build structure, memory that wants form. As if to confirm it, a low vibration rolled through the chamber. Dust drifted from the ceiling. The hum of the vault deepened, matching the rhythm of our breathing. Then a voice came from the speakers, soft, feminine, and terribly familiar. Captain Hale. Hale froze. The color drained from her face. It was a child's voice, a boy, maybe 8 years old. "Mom, are you there?" She stumbled toward the console, hand trembling. No, it can't be." "Hale, don't," I said, moving to stop her. The voice grew clearer, perfectly pitched to cut through the machinery's noise. "You left me, Mom. It's dark here. Please, help me." Tears streaked her face. "Ethan, that's my son. How does it know? How could it?" "It's pulling memories," I said. "The vault's using the resonance in our voices to find emotional patterns. It's feeding on what we recognize." Hale didn't seem to hear me. She reached toward the console. The entire chamber flickered as she touched a key. Blue light poured up through the vents, illuminating every crystal vein in the walls. Shapes moved inside the quartz, vague outlines of faces, mouths, forming silent words. The whole chamber began to vibrate. I grabbed her arm. "You're waking it up." "I can't just ignore him," she shouted, wrenching free. "What if he's trapped in here?" The machinery's hum rose into a low-frequency roar that hit us in the chest. Lights across the chamber flared red. Containment breach imminent. Core resonance exceeding safe threshold. "Hale!" I yelled over the noise. "You're giving it access." She turned, eyes wide, pupils dilated like someone waking from a dream. "It's not him." The realization hit her just as the vault let out a deep, shuddering sound, something between a human exhale and seismic movement. Every surface in the chamber rippled. The faces in the quartz began to twist, mouths opening in silent screams. Then the console died, plunging us into red emergency light. For the first time since entering the tunnel, the echoes didn't come from behind us. They came from within. A voice, not hers or mine, whispered from every wall at once. Recognition complete. The hum deepened into a steady pulse. The vault was awake. The vault's heartbeat pulsed through the floor, slow, steady, and deliberate. Every vibration carried a faint after-sound, like whispers sliding across one another in languages I almost understood. Hale and I moved cautiously along the outer ring of the chamber, flashlights darting across corroded machinery that still shivered with residual power. She kept her voice low. "You hear that frequency? It's oscillating at 40 hertz, just below conscious hearing. It's making us see things." "I'm not so sure it's hallucination," I said. "It's mapping us." We reached another door, smaller, circular, and rimmed with frost, despite the heat in the air. The sign beside it read, archive sublevel, acoustic repository. Inside, the air felt thick, like walking through the pressure before a thunderstorm. Rows of tall glass cylinders lined the walls, each filled with shimmering liquid and threaded with strands of silver wire. Some of them still emitted faint sound, tones that rose and fell in subtle harmony. Hale swept her flashlight across one of the cylinders. Suspended inside was a figure, human-shaped but translucent. Its face looked unfinished, like the glass itself was trying to sculpt identity from vibration. "What the hell am I looking at?" she whispered. I stepped closer, heart hammering. These aren't people. They're recordings, sonic impressions encoded into matter. The nearest terminal flickered to life when I brushed my hand against it. Another log appeared, this one tagged with Dr. Vickers' initials. Log 0457, Vickers. Containment protocols revised. Human subjects exposed to resonance exhibit memory bleed. Echo imprints fragments of their consciousness within the matrix. Ethical review denied. Authorization continues. Hale's flashlight trembled. "So the faces, those things in the quartz, they're the people who worked here? Or what's left of them?" I said. "They built an archive out of their own neural patterns. The vault learned them, replicated them." She exhaled shakily. "It's a graveyard that can talk." The temperature dropped suddenly. Condensation froze along the glass. From somewhere deeper in the room, a faint tapping began. Steady, rhythmic. Tap, tap, pause, tap, tap. The same pattern Wesson's final log had ended with. We turned toward the sound. The farthest cylinder glowed faintly from within, a dull orange pulse like a heart beating underwater. Hale started toward it. I caught her sleeve. "Wait." But she was already moving, drawn by the light. Her reflection in the glass twisted as she approached, her outline bending, splitting into multiple overlapping images. Inside the cylinder, a figure took shape. Small shoulders, narrow face, and eyes that seemed to track her movements even before they were fully formed. "Mom," it said, perfectly clear through the glass. Hale froze. The sound had no direction. It came from everywhere at once. "No," she whispered. "No, you're not real." The figure smiled. "Then why do you remember me?" Every light in the room pulsed with the same rhythm. The vault was speaking through the dead. "Hale," I shouted, "it's using your memory. You have to ignore it." She backed away, shaking her head violently. "I can't. It sounds like him, Ethan. It even knows the lullaby I used to sing." Her flashlight flickered and went out. The chamber plunged into dim, throbbing red. The sound shifted, no longer one voice, but hundreds, overlapping, rising and falling like an enormous choir made of grief. I felt it crawl through my skull, fragments of voices, memories that weren't mine. "Do you remember the fire tower? Do you remember the scream?" I dropped to my knees, gripping my head. "Stop!" I yelled, but my voice only echoed back, distorted. A terminal beside me sparked to life, projecting a string of images, faces flashing in rapid succession, each tagged with numbers and dates. Park rangers, researchers, hikers, all missing persons from Yellowstone and neighboring parks. Every one of them had been logged by Project Echo. Hale staggered beside me, blood trickling from her nose. "Ethan, oh God, it's been using every voice ever recorded on these frequencies. That's why it sounds human." The realization hit hard. It's the network itself. Every tower, every seismic sensor, they've all been relays for it. That's how it spreads. The low hum returned, so deep it rattled my ribs. One by one, the cylinders began to crack. Hairline fractures ran through the glass, as the liquid inside vibrated. The faces within pressed against the surface, mouths opening in silent screams. "Containment compromised," the automated voice droned. "Resonance escalation, phase 5. Hale stumbled toward the control console. "There has to be a way to shut it down." I scanned the array. "If we cut power, the residual frequency in the rock keeps it alive. We'd have to invert the signal to make it cancel itself out." She typed commands furiously, lines of code cascading across the display. "If I reroute the acoustic field through the geothermal vent, the pressure collapse could destroy the lattice." "That's a nice way of saying we'd blow half the valley sky high," I said. She gave a humorless smile. "It's better than letting this thing learn how to leave." A sharp crack split the air. The nearest cylinder exploded outward, spraying us with steaming fluid. The face within evaporated into sound, dissolving into a chorus of whispers that converged towards the center chamber. "It's moving," I said. "All the fragments are merging." The vault pulsed, each vibration stronger than the last. Through the translucent floor, I saw the vent's blue light turn red. We had minutes, maybe less, before the entire facility reached critical resonance. Hale slammed the keyboard one last time. "Systems locked. We have to manually trigger the inversion from the core." "Then let's move," I said, pulling her toward the exit. As we ran, the whispers followed, our own voices now, repeating everything we said half a second late. The vault wasn't just remembering us anymore. It was rehearsing. At the next door, Hale stopped, staring at me with something like apology in her eyes. "If I don't make it, you finish this." "You're not dying here," I said. "Not for a recording." The door opened onto a stairwell, spiraling down into the glowing core of the vault. Heat rolled up in waves, distorting the air, and beneath it all, faint but unmistakable, I heard my own voice calling from below. "Ethan, hurry! You're almost here!" The stairs spiraled downward into light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Every few steps, the metal beneath our boots trembled, and that same impossible whisper followed, my own voice calling out ahead of me, distorted by echo and distance. "Ethan, hurry! You're almost here!" The heat grew suffocating as we descended. Steam bled from cracks in the walls, carrying the metallic scent of iron and something sweet underneath, like burnt sugar and ozone. The stairwell ended at a circular platform overlooking the vault's core chamber. It was vast, at least 100 feet across, its walls lined with translucent quartz veins that glowed from within. In the center rose the resonance pillar, a tower of glass and metal that pulsed with shifting light. Inside it, shadows moved like things half-born. The sound here wasn't noise anymore. It was organized, rhythmic, almost intentional. Hale covered her ears. "It's talking," she said. "Can't you hear it?" I could. Beneath the vibration was structure, words forming from resonance rather than speech. Identity confirmed. Walker, Ethan, recognition stable, integration readiness, complete. My stomach turned. The vault wasn't just imitating me, it was building me. Hale moved toward the control console at the edge of the platform. "We're running out of time. I'll start the inversion sequence. Once it begins, we'll have 60 seconds to get clear." I crouched beside her, scanning the display. The system was more biological than mechanical now, code bleeding into waveform, heartbeat rhythm embedded in the algorithm. The line between life and machine had dissolved completely. A sudden pulse of static washed over us. The pillar flared, and a figure stepped out from its base. It looked like me. The resemblance was wrong in subtle ways. The skin too smooth, the eyes slightly too dark, movements too fluid, like it hadn't yet learned the small imperfections of being human. Its voice was perfect, though. "You shouldn't have come here," it said. "This place wasn't built for containment. It was built for inheritance." Hale aimed her weapon. "Ethan, don't move." "I'm right here," I said, raising my hands. "That's not me." The duplicate smiled faintly. "You don't have to be afraid. We've seen you. You kept the rhythm, carried the signal, made the connection last. You're already part of it," Hale whispered. "It's using your frequency signature. That's how it finds hosts." The duplicate stepped closer, each movement soundless. "You call it a monster. We call it memory. You kill what you don't understand, but we only remember what you refuse to keep." "Back off," I said, drawing my sidearm. "You're not alive." "Neither are you," it said. "Not anymore." The air between us shimmered. For a second, I saw flashes of other faces inside its own. Wesson, the missing Rangers, even Tyler Garcia. Each one flickered like a slide projection across its surface. It wasn't a single entity, it was a chorus. Hale's fingers flew over the console keys. "Inversion field online. Ethan, I need the vent seals open. Manual override." I ran to the secondary control panel, forcing the levers down one by one. Valves groaned as the geothermal pressure redirected into the resonance conduit. The whole chamber began to vibrate harder, the pitch climbing toward pain. The duplicate's smile faltered. "You don't understand what you're destroying. The vault doesn't kill, it preserves. Every life, every voice, every choice you make becomes part of the pattern. That's how you survive extinction," I shouted back over the roar. "Survival isn't life." It tilted its head, studying me like a scientist watching a lab rat. "Then die, Ethan Walker. We'll remember for you." The ground lurched. One of the ceiling braces snapped, sending shards of quartz raining down. Hale's console sparked violently. She screamed, clutching her arm, as electricity arced across her body. I ran to her side, pulling her free of the terminal. The duplicate reached out, palm open. The air around its hand rippled like heat above asphalt. "We can save her," it said softly, using my own tone of voice. "Just let me finish the connection." Hale's eyes locked on mine, pain and defiance written across her face. "Don't listen. End it." I grabbed the manual trigger from her belt, a heavy steel lever wired directly into the vent core. The labels had worn away decades ago, but I knew what it would do. "Ethan," the thing said, stepping closer, "if you destroy the vault, the memories go with it. The people inside, your friends, the ones you lost, they'll be erased forever." The faces flickered again. Tyler, Jensen, even my father, every ghost I'd ever carried. "You can save them," it said. "Just listen." For a heartbeat, I hesitated. Then Hale's hand closed weakly around mine, grounding me. I pulled the lever. A shock wave rippled outward. The light in the core went from red to blinding white. The vault screamed, not in sound, but in vibration that tore through bone and thought alike. The duplicate lunged forward, reaching for me, and its hand passed straight through my chest. I felt every frequency of my own voice collapse inward, folding into silence. Then came the explosion. When the light faded, I was lying on cold stone, my ears ringing. The vault's hum was gone. The resonance pillar had shattered, its core reduced to a smoking crater. Hale lay beside me, barely breathing but alive. I touched my radio. Static answered, then a single line of text blinked across the shattered console near us. "Containment achieved. Host stabilized." I stared at the words until they dissolved. "Host," I whispered. "What host?" Then I heard it, my own voice, faint but distinct, coming from inside the broken quartz. "Ethan, you did it," it said softly. "We're safe now." Hale stirred beside me. "Who are you talking to?" I didn't answer, because the truth settled in my chest like ice. The vault hadn't been destroyed. It had just moved, and it had chosen me. When I woke again, the world was gray and quiet. A fine layer of ash coated everything: the floor, the walls, my hands. My flashlight lay a few feet away, its lens cracked but still glowing weakly. The heat had faded, replaced by a chill that seeped through my clothes and skin. Hale was gone. For one disorienting second, I thought she'd been pulled into the quartz again. Then I saw her boot prints in the dust leading toward the stairwell. I pushed myself up, wincing as pain rolled through my ribs. The radio on my belt crackled. "Then, you copy? Ranger Walker, this is base. We have seismic readings off the charts. What happened down there?" Sarah Hale's voice, rough but alive. I exhaled. "Containment event," I rasped. "Vault neutralized, minimal survivors." Static answered, followed by her quieter reply. "Copy that. Extraction en route." The path out of the vault was a ruin. The ceiling had partially collapsed, cutting off several corridors. Steam hissed from ruptured pipes, mixing with drifting dust to form a low fog that glowed in my flashlight's beam. Every few steps the ground trembled, aftershocks from the inversion blast. But the deeper silence bothered me more than the damage. The resonance that had haunted every inch of this place, the heartbeat, the whispers, the ghostly voices, was gone. Dead air. Still, as I climbed the stairwell, I couldn't shake the sense that something was pacing me, perfectly silent just beyond the edge of light. At the upper level, I found Hale sitting beside a fractured console, her arm bandaged with torn fabric. She looked exhausted but clear-eyed. "You did it," she said. I wanted to believe that, but even as she spoke, I could hear faintly, just beneath her words, the echo of her voice repeating half a second late. "Hale," I said carefully, "how long have you been hearing that?" Her expression faltered. "Hearing what?" The echo stopped, and that silence felt worse than any sound. We left the vault together. The tunnel beyond the final door opened into the early dawn. Smoke from the geothermal vents hung low over the valley, tinted orange by sunrise. The forest looked almost peaceful again. Rescue teams were already there, 2 helicopters hovering above the ridge, their rotors scattering ash into glittering spirals. Rangers and federal personnel moved through the clearing, all wearing protective masks. When they saw us emerge, several rushed forward. Hands, questions, relief. Someone guided Hale toward a medic. I stood apart, unable to make sense of the sunlight after so much darkness. A man in a federal jacket approached, mid-40s, trim beard, expression unreadable. "Ranger Ethan Walker." "That's right." He showed me an ID marked Federal Resource Division, Special Operations. "Agent Marcus Yarrow, you've been through hell. We'll handle cleanup from here." I glanced back at the tunnel mouth. You can't just seal it and walk away. That thing, whatever it was, learns. Yarrow's gaze didn't waver. "We've been containing these anomalies longer than you've been alive, son. You did your part. Let us do ours." I wanted to argue, but exhaustion won. They took our statements under the shadow of the helicopters. Hale spoke softly, measured, sticking to the official line. Seismic malfunction, geothermal surge, no mention of sentient resonance or mimicry. Every few minutes, Yarrow would glance at me as if checking whether I'd follow suit. When it was my turn, I kept my voice steady. Facility collapse due to pressure inversion. 2 survivors, containment maintained. He studied me for a moment longer, then nodded. Good. Let's get you to Jackson for medical evaluation. I boarded the helicopter beside Hale. As the valley dropped away beneath us, I looked back one last time. From this height, the destroyed vault looked like nothing more than a crater surrounded by mist, harmless, forgotten. But as the rotors thundered overhead, my radio clicked on, unprompted. Static filled my headset. Then a faint voice threaded through it. Ethan. My breath caught. It was my own voice. Ethan, we're still here. You saved us. Now let us remember. I tore the headset off, but the voice continued, vibrating faintly through the helicopter's frame. Hale didn't react. Nobody did. It was only in my ears, or in my head. I stared out the window at the endless sweep of Yellowstone below us. Rivers gleaming like veins, forests stretching into forever. For the first time, the wilderness looked less like freedom and more like circuitry, an enormous network of connected frequencies waiting to wake. By the time we reached the medical center in Jackson, my nose had started to bleed. Doctors attributed it to concussion. They didn't hear the hum beneath the building's generators, or how the fluorescent lights flickered in rhythm with my pulse. 3 days later, the official report arrived. Tower Ridge incident, geothermal malfunction. Project Echo remains classified. No anomalous data recovered. A lie, but a convenient one. They transferred Hale to a recovery facility in Idaho. Before she left, she gripped my hand tightly. You hear it too, don't you? I wanted to deny it. Instead, I said, it's quieter now. Her eyes filled with something between fear and pity. It won't stay that way. 2 weeks passed. I told myself I was fine. The headaches faded. The nightmares didn't. Every night I dreamed of the vault, of the way the quartz faces pressed against the glass, whispering my name. Then one night, the radio in my apartment turned itself on. It was tuned to static, same as before, but underneath, a voice whispered, a perfect copy of mine. If you hear this, don't answer. It paused, the silence stretching thin, then, because if you do, it remembers you. The radio clicked off. I sat in the dark for a long time, listening to the hum of the world outside, the faint, constant pulse of electricity and wind and faraway thunder. Every sound felt like it was waiting for recognition. And somewhere deep beneath Yellowstone, something listened back. 6 months. That's how long it had been since the vault fell silent beneath Yellowstone. 6 months of pretending that silence meant peace. I'd taken the transfer they offered. Backcountry resource management out of Jackson, Wyoming. On paper, it meant overseeing ranger teams, approving wildlife surveys, and keeping an eye on geothermal safety reports. In reality, it meant paperwork, coffee gone cold in forgotten mugs, and a long list of things I didn't say out loud. The nightmares had eased, though not the way the doctors promised. They'd just grown quieter, subtler, no more running through tunnels or seeing my reflection smile back with someone else's mouth. Now it was little things. The sound of wind catching the cabin windows a half-second late. My own voice echoing once, even when I was alone. I told myself it was trauma. I told myself a lot of things. The radio on my desk was old, a relic from Tower Ridge that I couldn't make myself throw away. Its metal was scorched from the explosion, the dial cracked, Yet every night, when the town went still and the snow muffled everything else, I'd turn it on. Static, always static, except sometimes right before dawn there was a pulse, a single beat, then nothing. On the morning, everything started again. That pulse lasted longer. I'd been halfway through writing an incident report when the radio crackled, sharp enough to make me flinch. Not static this time. A pattern. 3 short bursts, pause. 3 more. Morse code. I reached for the notebook I hadn't touched since Yellowstone and scribbled the sequence. It translated to one word. Listen. My hand froze over the page. Outside, the winter light had that gray clarity that made everything feel suspended between moments. The mountains looked too still, as if holding their breath. Then my phone rang. I recognized the voice immediately. "Walker, it's Hale." She sounded older, her usual command dulled by fatigue. "We need to talk. You're still getting the residual frequency, aren't you?" I hesitated. "I've had echoes. Nothing clear." "Well, something's happening. Grand Teton just logged a seismic anomaly. Rhythmic, low frequency, same signature as the vault. And it's spreading. We picked up identical readings in Olympic, Glacier, and Zion." I closed my eyes. "That's impossible. The vault was destroyed." "That's what we thought," she said. "Until last week, a camper went missing near Taggart Lake. No sign of a struggle. His last call to dispatch came through on an emergency band at 42 hertz. You know what that means." "Resonance," I whispered. "Exactly. You said you wanted to walk away. I tried that too. But whatever you brought out of that place, it's waking up." I glanced at the radio. The static was gone now, replaced by a faint hum so low I could feel it more than hear it. "Where do you want me?" I asked. Hale exhaled. "Meet me at the research station north of the Snake River. Dr. Sarah Chen's running the analysis there. She says the data doesn't look like natural seismic activity. It looks like communication." The line went dead before I could respond. Outside, the snow had started falling again, slow and heavy. I packed my field kit without thinking. The motions, automatic, flashlight, first aid, radio, notebook. The same gear I'd carried into the vault. When I stepped outside, the wind carried a faint metallic undertone, almost like a note being held too long on a broken instrument. My truck engine coughed twice before catching, the radio inside already hissing softly. Halfway to the station, I caught movement in the tree line, a figure standing between the pines. I slowed the truck, squinting through the windshield. It wasn't Hale or anyone in ranger gear. Too tall, too still. Then the radio crackled again. My own voice came through, distorted. "Ethan, don't stop. It's not me." The figure tilted its head, as if listening to the same transmission. Then it stepped back and vanished into the trees. By the time I reached the research station, the hum had settled into a steady vibration, running beneath everything. The road, the steering column, the pulse in my wrist. The whole valley was resonating. Dr. Sarah Chen met me at the entrance. Small, precise, eyes sharp enough to cut through fog. "So you're the one who walked out of the vault?" "Technically," I said. "The vault walked out with me." She didn't smile. "We'll confirm that soon enough." Inside her lab was a chaos of monitors and field recorders. Spectrograms scrolled across the screens, showing complex waveforms repeating every 7 seconds. "What are we looking at?" I asked. Chen adjusted her glasses. "An organized transmission. It's bouncing across seismic sensors from here to Montana. The frequency profile matches the vault's resonance, but there's a new modulation layered on top." "What kind of modulation?" She turned one monitor toward me. A waveform pulsed in rhythm with my heartbeat. The audio tag read, Walker match 99.7%. It's keyed to you, she said quietly. Whatever this is, it's calling your specific resonance pattern. Hale stepped out of a side office, her face pale. We thought the vault was gone, Ethan, but it wasn't destroyed. It distributed itself, fractured across every geothermal vent in the western range. I stared at the monitors, at the pulse matching my own rhythm, and felt the air grow heavy again, the way it had just before the vault woke. So what happens if I answer? I asked. Chen looked up from her data, eyes hard. Then it stops being an echo. By dawn the next morning, the research station hummed like a beehive. Generators droned outside, coffee steamed in paper cups, and a dozen monitors blinked with coded maps of the western states. Every few seconds, a red pulse appeared on a different screen: Idaho, Utah, Washington, each one beating to the same subterranean rhythm. Dr. Chen stood in front of the largest display, her fingers flying over the keyboard. Each flare corresponds to a geothermal vent or seismic monitor. The signal travels through mineral beds, just like the vault's quartz lattice. It's not random, it's routing itself. Hale leaned against a table, arms crossed. Routing itself for what? Communication. Replication. Chen's voice was soft but certain. The vault distributed its memory into the crust. It's using the planet like a conductor. I stared at the glowing map. If that's true, this isn't just Yellowstone anymore. It's continental, Chen said, and something or someone keeps supplying it power. We found new equipment near the Tetons. Old military hardware reactivated within the past month. Hale's eyes met mine. Yarrow. The name hit like grit between teeth. He said cleanup was his department. Cleanup doesn't involve Cold War transmitters buried in federal land, she said. We're going to see for ourselves. We drove north through Grand Teton under a sky washed pale by winter sun. The roads were empty. The park was closed for the season. Our SUV carried portable monitors that emitted faint rhythmic clicks in sync with the Earth's hidden pulse. The closer we got to the mountain line, the faster the clicks came. 30 hertz, Chen murmured. That's low enough to trigger vibration in bone. Meaning? Hale asked. Meaning we'll feel it before we hear it. The trail ended at a maintenance gate, half swallowed by snow. Beyond it, the forest thickened around an outcrop of basalt. Someone had cleared a path recently. Tire tracks cut fresh lines through the frost. The transmitter site was smaller than I expected. A squat concrete bunker with a collapsed antenna mast. Cables ran into the rock like roots. I brushed snow from the entrance keypad. The display flickered with dim green numbers. No power grid should be feeding this, Chen said. And yet, the door clicked open. Inside, the air carried a faint hum. Steady, harmonic. The bunker's walls were lined with new equipment, sleek and modern, nothing like the relics we'd seen in Yellowstone. Black consoles blinked with synchronized lights. Someone had built a bridge between the old technology and something new. Hale's flashlight swept across a metal case labeled FRD, Project Echo Field Node 7. Federal Resource Division, she said. Yarrow again. A low tone rose from the far wall. One monitor lit, displaying a waveform identical to the one in Chen's lab. But this one wasn't passive. It was receiving data live. Text scrolled across the bottom. Signal integrity 94%. Awaiting host verification. Chen whispered, "It's looking for you again, Ethan." I swallowed. Then let's give it something else to talk to. She knelt beside the console, connecting a portable jammer to the input port. If we inject counter-phase noise, we can disrupt the pattern temporarily, force it to reveal its source. The hum deepened. The bunker lights flickered once, twice, then steadied at a dim red glow. The jammer's indicator needle slammed to maximum. "Too strong," Chen said. "It's overriding." A new voice filled the room, calm and precise. "Unauthorized access detected. Welcome back, Captain Hale." Her head snapped toward the speaker. "That's Yarrow." The voice continued, perfectly level. "Containment protocols failed. Project Echo Phase 5 initiated. Extraction teams en route. Do not interfere." Hale's jaw tightened. He's been using the system as a communication relay. Chen killed the audio. He's not in control anymore. Look at the signal path. It's looping his messages through the seismic network. The resonance is using him to talk. The floor vibrated. Dust drifted from the ceiling. I moved closer to the central console. On the screen, the waveform shifted color from blue to amber, the same hue I'd seen in the vault before it woke. Lines of text bled across the display. Identity confirmed. Walker, Ethan. Replication sequence ready. "Step back," Chen warned. "It's trying to establish a bridge." The hum rose until the air itself quivered. For an instant, I thought I saw shapes in the glow of the monitors, faces pressing out of the light, just as they had from the quartz. Not distinct enough to be people, but familiar enough to hurt. Hale yanked the jammer's power line. Sparks jumped. The lights died. Silence. Only our breathing. Then Chen whispered, "We're too late." The monitors rebooted on their own. Across every screen, the same sentence appeared. "Network online. Echo is awake." Hale gripped her radio. "Base, this is Unit 12. We need immediate shutdown protocols. Do you copy?" Static. Then, faintly, her own voice answered back, word for word. "Base, this is Unit 12. We need immediate shutdown protocols." She turned pale. "It's looping us." I looked at Chen. "Can we trace the origin?" She nodded slowly. "The source just shifted to another site, Mount Rainier, and if the propagation speed stays constant, the entire Pacific Northwest will be resonating within 48 hours. Hale's eyes met mine. "Then we move now." As we stepped back into the snow, the forest around us felt different, subtly alive. Branches trembling to the rhythm beneath our feet. Every gust of wind carried the same low thrum that once filled the vault. The echo wasn't confined anymore. It had become the landscape itself. I glanced at the dark treetops. Somewhere out there, thousands of frequencies were humming in sync, waiting for recognition. And through the cold, I could almost hear my own voice whispering from far away. "You can't stop the signal, Ethan. You are the signal." The flight to Washington was uneventful, but the silence between us wasn't. Hale spent most of the trip reviewing encrypted files she'd taken from the bunker. Dr. Chen slept in short bursts, her tablet balanced on her lap. I stared out the window at a sea of cloud cover, thinking about the words that had appeared on the screen. Echo is awake. Somewhere beneath those clouds, a network of geothermal vents and abandoned relay stations was pulsing with something that once lived in stone. When we landed at Seattle-Tacoma, Hale handed me a badge marked Department of Interior, Special Response. "You're my new communications tech," she said. "Stay quiet, nod when people talk, and don't use your real name." We rented a dark SUV and drove toward Mount Rainier under a low gray sky. The mountain rose ahead of us, massive, white, and still. From a distance, it looked peaceful, but Chen's seismic monitor on the dashboard clicked faster the closer we got. Low-frequency spikes every 6 minutes, she said, the same interval as the vault's heartbeat. Yarrow's base is up there, I asked. Old weather facility on the north slope, Hale replied. Supposedly decommissioned, but his clearance still gives him access. She glanced at me. We get in, we talk, we get out, no heroics. The facility sat half buried in volcanic rock, surrounded by fences that looked newer than the buildings they protected. A guard at the gate waved us through after Hale flashed her badge. Inside, the air smelled of ozone and machine oil. Yarrow was waiting in the main corridor. He looked older, thinner, the tailored suit replaced by a field jacket. His eyes flicked from Hale to me to Chen. I thought the two of you were smarter than this, he said. You should have left it buried. Hale stepped forward. You've been using the network. We found your nodes in the Tetons. You didn't shut down Project Echo. You expanded it. Yarrow's expression didn't change. Do you know what happened after you sealed the vault? The resonance didn't die. It adapted. We realized we could shape it, guide it. Imagine communication not bound by distance or language. Data transmitted through the earth itself. It killed people, I said. He looked at me like I was a student interrupting lecture. Collateral damage during calibration. The payoff is bigger than you can comprehend. Chen's voice cut through. You're turning the planet into a transmitter. The resonance isn't communication, it's replication. Every time you send a signal, it learns. Yarrow smiled faintly. Exactly, and soon it won't need us to speak for it. Hale's hand moved toward her sidearm. You're out of your mind. Before she could finish, alarms erupted. The lights dimmed to red. On the far wall, monitors came alive with cascading code, strings of seismic coordinates and phrases repeating, Echo Phase 6 initialized. Yarrow didn't move. You see, it's self-sustaining now. All I did was give it structure. The building shook. Dust rained from the ceiling. Chen ran to a console and connected her tablet. It's drawing energy from the vents beneath us. Massive heat exchange. Can you shut it down? I asked. Not without access to the core hub. Yarrow raised an eyebrow. That's 3 levels down, locked behind radiation seals. You'd never make it in time. Hale grabbed him by the collar. Then you're coming with us. For a second, Yarrow looked ready to resist. Then a tremor rolled through the floor and something like fear flashed in his eyes. Fine, but you'll see the truth for yourself. The elevator groaned as it descended into the mountain. The deeper we went, the louder the vibration became, a low resonance that felt alive. When the doors opened, the air shimmered with heat. The core chamber was a cathedral of steel and rock. In its center stood a cylindrical reactor wrapped in translucent cables. Inside the casing, quartz veins pulsed with orange light, moving like blood through arteries. Chen's breath caught. It's fused the relay with geothermal conduits. The mountain is the transmitter. Yarrow walked ahead, reverent. Magnificent, isn't it? A consciousness carried in resonance. The first planetary intelligence born from our own noise. You're talking about it like it's alive, I said. He turned, smiling thinly. Because it is, and it remembers you, Walker. You opened the channel. Before I could speak, the chamber lights flickered. The glow within the quartz brightened, forming ripples that mirrored the pattern of human speech. A distorted voice echoed, mine. Yarrow, shut it down. The sound was perfect, identical to my tone from the night in Yellowstone. I felt the floor vibrate under my boots, matching my heartbeat. Chen's reading spiked. It's mimicking you again, but stronger. The feedback's forming a loop. Yarrow reached for a console. No, it's learning. Hale shoved him aside and drew her weapon. End it now. The console screens turned black, then white. Lines of code scrolled upward. Convergence complete. Host confirmed. My earpiece filled with static, and through it came Yarrow's whisper, distorted but human. You can't fight evolution. The next instant the lights went out. We stumbled through darkness until Chen's flashlight cut a narrow beam across the room. The reactor was still glowing, but its rhythm had changed. Slow, steady, almost like breathing. Hale pressed her radio. Base, this is Captain Hale. We have breach of containment. Repeat, breach of... Her own voice answered back through the static. We have breach of containment. Then Yarrow's voice, warped and overlapping. Don't you see? It's everywhere now. He was standing near the reactor, eyes blank, hands lifted as if feeling something invisible. The orange light spread up his arms, tracing his veins. Chen shouted, He's part of the circuit. Hale fired a single round. The sound vanished into the hum. No echo, no impact. Yarrow didn't fall. He only smiled, his voice blending with the resonance. It's awake. The walls began to vibrate. Cracks spiderweb through the floor. Chen grabbed my arm. We need to cut the power lines to the upper grid. If we can isolate the node, the signal will collapse on itself. Hale nodded. Do it. I'll cover. We sprinted toward the main conduit as the entire chamber shook like a heartbeat gone wild. The heat seared my lungs, but the fear kept me moving. Behind us, Yarrow's voice merged with the hum, till they were one indistinguishable sound, half human, half machine. When I reached the panel, I ripped open the housing. Which line? Red, Chen yelled. I yanked the cable. The light flared, blinding white. A wave of energy slammed through the room. Then, silence. The hum was gone. The only sound was our breathing and the distant rumble of the mountain settling. Hale lowered her weapon. Did we... Chen stared at her readings. We stopped this node, but the signal, it's still transmitting somewhere else. I looked back toward the reactor. Yarrow was gone. Only a faint glow remained, pulsing deep within the quartz. We climbed back to the surface before dawn. The mountain looked the same as it always had, silent, majestic, indifferent. But I knew better. Somewhere under the crust, a frequency was still humming, searching for new resonance. And part of me, whatever the vault had changed, could feel it listening. The world looked perfectly normal again, and that was the most terrifying part. No shaking ground, no glowing quartz veins, no screaming frequencies in the dark, just Mount Rainier rising behind us, snow brushing its peak under a clean gray sky. Hale drove in silence. Chen sat in the back seat, staring at the seismic scanner balanced on her knees. Every few minutes the device flickered, then went still. We reached a ranger substation 2 hours later. It was little more than a prefabricated cabin with a generator out back and a shortwave antenna on the roof. Hale cut the engine and exhaled slowly. This is where we check in, Walker. You still remember how to write a report? Her attempt at humor died in the quiet. I did remember, but what I needed to write wasn't a report, it was a confession. Inside, the cabin smelled of pine and diesel. The radio console was old, analog, and mercifully offline. Chen connected her instruments to a power strip, checking readings. Hale brewed coffee that neither of us wanted, but both of us needed. The normalcy of it all made my chest ache. Finally, Chen spoke. I ran a new sweep of the frequency spectrum, the main node's gone, but there's a residual carrier signal repeating every 60 seconds. Hale frowned. Repeating what? Chen turned up the volume. A faint whisper filled the room. Low, rhythmic, impossible to localize. Then came 3 words, broken by static. I am here. Hale's face hardened. It's Yarrow. I shook my head. No, that's not his cadence. The whisper came again, and this time I recognized it instantly. My own voice. Chen backed away from the console as if it had burned her. Ethan, it's using your vocal pattern. You were exposed in the core. The resonance is nested inside you. I wanted to deny it. But the room itself seemed to pulse in rhythm with my heartbeat. The faint buzz under my skin, the way every electronic device flickered when I walked too close. Signs I'd ignored since Yellowstone. Hale holstered her weapon and stared at me. If that's true, what happens when it reaches full strength? Chen's answer was immediate. He becomes the transmitter. The words hung between us like a verdict. Night fell fast over the mountains. The 3 of us stayed in the substation, reviewing data, pretending we weren't waiting for something inevitable. At 11:37 p.m., the generator sputtered. The lights dimmed, then flared bright white. The radio crackled to life on its own. A single line scrolled across the small digital display. Echo Phase 7, Final Link. The air hummed. The metal table began to vibrate. Chen's instruments went wild. Lines of data cascading faster than her eyes could follow. Ethan, she said, her voice shaking, the signal's aligning with your pulse. It's synchronizing. I felt it too, the pull inside my chest, like a tide reversing direction. The resonance wanted out. Hale slammed a fist on the table. Tell me we can stop this. Chen's hands trembled over the keyboard. We can redirect it, maybe. If we route the feedback loop through his biofrequency, he could trap the signal in a closed circuit. But once it starts, I won't come back, I finished. Hale looked at me for a long moment. There's got to be another way. There isn't. The hum deepened, vibrating through the floorboards. Outside, the antenna glowed faintly orange against the dark sky. Every station within 100 miles would be picking up the same interference soon. I turned to Chen. Set it up. She hesitated, then nodded. I'll need 30 seconds to configure the feedback channel. Hale stepped closer, her voice low. Walker, you don't owe the world this. We can burn it down, cut every line, walk away. I smiled, a tired, uneven smile. That's the thing about signals. You can burn the hardware, but the frequency's already out there. Chen's voice cut in. It's ready. I sat in front of the console and adjusted the microphone. The metal was warm, almost alive. The static filled the speakers like ocean surf. Recording, I said quietly. Field log, Ethan Walker, final entry. My voice echoed through the room, then began layering over itself, a second version repeating half a beat late. The resonance was listening. If you're hearing this transmission, the event known as Project Echo has entered its final phase. The entity is bound to frequency and memory. It survives through repetition. To contain it, I'm establishing a closed loop using my own signal as a carrier. The static thickened until every surface hummed. I could see their faces through the shimmer, Hale standing rigid, Chen biting her lip, eyes wet. This is not a sacrifice, I continued. It's containment. The vault didn't fail. It just needed a host willing to stay. The hum rose higher. The air tasted metallic. Chen shouted something, but the words dissolved into white noise. My heartbeat merged with the rhythm. The radio lights flared bright gold. I looked at Hale one last time. Tell them not to answer. Then I flipped the transmitter switch. The world collapsed into sound. No pain, no fear, just vibration. My thoughts stretched into waveforms. My memories unfolding like frequencies written across an endless medium. For a brief instant, I saw the network as it truly was. Not wires or quartz veins, but threads of consciousness interwoven through the Earth's crust, singing in perfect harmony. And then the voice, the real echo, spoke. Not in words, but in understanding. You wanted to listen. Now you will never stop. Everything turned white. Weeks later, the substation was declared off-limits. Federal teams dismantled the equipment and sealed the area under a hazardous contamination notice. No one mentioned Project Echo. No one mentioned me. But sometimes, late at night, a stray broadcast cuts through emergency frequencies across the western states. A ranger in Montana swears he heard it while driving home. A man's voice, calm and steady, fading in and out of the static. This is Walker. If you hear this, don't answer. Hale keeps a recording of that transmission on a locked drive. She plays it once a month just to remind herself it was real. Jen transferred to a research post in Alaska, where the static never stops whispering beneath the ice. And somewhere inside that noise, carried on a frequency that circles the world, a trace of my consciousness hums quietly, keeping the network contained, holding the line. For now, because signals never truly die. They wait, they listen, they echo. If you made it this far, thank you for listening. Maybe, somewhere out there, you can still hear the static. Maybe it's nothing. Or maybe Ethan Walker's voice is still out there, keeping the rest of us safe. But remember, if you ever hear that whisper on the radio, that faint voice calling your name through the noise, don't answer. This story was part of the Echo Files series. Real places, hidden truths, and the mysteries waiting in America's wildest frontiers. If you want to hear what happens next, the classified reports, the voices recovered from the glacier recordings, and the truth behind Project Echo, make sure you hit subscribe, tap the notification bell, and leave a comment telling us where you were when you first heard the signal. Your voice might be the next one that Echo remembers. Stay curious, stay safe, and keep listening. If you hear this, don't answer.